This story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as a family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here at the station. There is so much to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. The steel crisis seems to be over, or is it? Sir Christopher Chope, who is a Conservative MP for Christchurch, he's going to join us in a second. He was there in 1988 with the last steel nationalisation debate, one of the longest serving MPs. We're going to talk about that. We're going to hear from Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, and Andrew Griffith. They've been speaking on the media this morning. We'll also talk about this absolutely horrendous terrorist attack. 3 prison officers have been attacked at Manchester. One of them, of course, attacked Manchester Arena. We will be they're involved with that. We will talk to Ian Aitchison about that. He's the guy. He knows all this stuff back to front. HMP Frankland, one of those places that have some of the nastiest, most evil people in this country. Members of a grooming gang who preyed on teenage girls got legal aid, £611,000. What do you think of that? Also, English heritage. I mean, literally the clue is in the title, guys. English heritage. They claim Easter is not originally Christian, and it may not be, but what does that matter? There are so many Christians who celebrate Easter. The origins of a lot of these festivals, Christmas and Halloween and loads of different festivals, are not necessarily the way you think they might be, but that's not the point. The point is that English heritage should be doing all that it can to celebrate Easter. We'll talk as well about the interview I did on Thursday a little bit. That was with a barrister called Frank McGuinness. Well, now Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, says that those lawyers should be struck off. Frank McGuinness and his acolytes who are defending, well, not quite defending, but they're acting on behalf of Hamas anyway, and say they shouldn't be a prescribed organisation, say they shouldn't be thought of as a terrorist organisation in this country. Loads to discuss. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, and then Tech Up Dave will edit it together and play it all out. 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message as well, or you can give me a ring. You know the number. I'll give it to you one more time. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk. Well, Parliament was recalled on a Saturday for the first time in a while. Certainly there were tributes to the Queen 2 years ago, but in terms of passing legislation, well, that has only happened a few times since the war, and it was really in 2001 that happened. We heard a bit of the history of that yesterday, but Parliament was there and it was discussed about the steel plant, the blast furnace in Scunthorpe. What do you think of what the government has done? We asked the question yesterday, should we save British Steel? Well, British Steel now apparently has been saved. Keir Starmer went straight up to Scunthorpe. He spoke to some workers. They gave their opinion as did he. This is the video that Number 10 has put out.
I judged yesterday that it was right that we acted immediately to take control.
These are our last blast furnaces, and without them the UK will not have the ability to produce primary steel. It's vital for national security, it's vital for the national interest, and it's vital for our community.
After months of uncertainty for the workers, it's just nice to know that they've got a bit of stability back.
The atmosphere at work completely changed. Having the Prime Minister coming up so really is reinforcing that the government are on our side.
We've got a future for the steelworks in Scunthorpe and making steel for the country.
Well, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, was out and about this morning. We did ask him to come on the programme. He didn't have time, but he did speak to Sky News, and this is what the business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, said.
It is perhaps at this stage the likely option. But what we need for any steel site...
Is that because you don't think you can get a commercial private sector partner?
I believe there is a potential for that, and that is my preference, but I feel we've got to find a bridge to that. The kind of investments required for the transition to new steel technology, whichever technology that is, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of capital. Now, you need the government standing behind that. This government has done that with our steel fund. We put dedicated resources in, a big change from the last government in that regard.
That's the business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, speaking to Sky News a little bit earlier on today. Andrew Griffith is his opposite number, the shadow business secretary. This is what Andrew Griffith told Sky News.
It was a deal that was welcomed by the GMB union, by the community union and by UK Steel. And indeed they subsequently went on, and it was the only deal at the time. And many people, including the British steel workers, the unions on the ground, local MPs, all wanted that deal to happen. And it did indeed go on and get investment into Scunthorpe and keep the business going.
That was Jonathan Reynolds talking, Jonathan Reynolds speaking earlier, and then Andrew Griffith speaking, the shadow business secretary. And Andrew Griffith, I think, referring there to the deal that was on the table when Kemi Badenoch, who now is, of course, the leader of the Conservatives, but previously she was the business and trade secretary and was attempting to negotiate to see if British Steel could be kept going, if those blast furnaces could be kept going. Well, Sir Christopher Chope is the MP for Christchurch. He's a Conservative and joins me now. Sir Christopher, thank you for joining me this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I wonder what you think of where we are with UK Steel now, whether you feel what happened yesterday was the right thing and whether you feel it was a choice or whether it was just simply inevitable that the legislation went through yesterday, because there are quite a few concerns that have been raised, not least by Ian Duncan-Smith in your party, by Daisy Cooper, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, that the government may have too much power and that this may be a sort of slippery slope towards nationalisation. I wonder what you think.
Well, I think it's a complete mess, and we've salvaged something, so the blast furnaces will keep going, and that's the number one issue. I put a question down to the government 10 days ago, asking them whether they would, if necessary, nationalise British Steel in order to ensure that the blast furnaces were maintained, and I got a holding answer effectively on Tuesday, saying they were still talking. So I don't understand why it took until Thursday before the Prime Minister woke up to the reality, which people on the ground knew, and that is that the owners of British Steel had plans to close down the blast furnaces in June at the latest, and perhaps sooner than that. And the reason I know about that is because in my constituency, I've got one of the largest British users of British steel, which is Reed Steel, and they make bridges and other construction projects across the world, and they need to have top quality virgin steel in order to produce the strength of their structures. And they contacted me and said, look, we've got to keep this primary steel works going. What's going to happen? And okay, in the end, the government got there, but introduced primary legislation at the last minute. And by doing it at the last minute, they were able to avoid the sort of detailed scrutiny which Parliament should give to this sort of legislation, which gives the Secretary of State enormous power. But I think it's in the best interest of the country, it's in the best interest of Scunthorpe and its steel workers that this has happened. It should have happened sooner, in my view.
I wonder, in regard to the government doing this yesterday, obviously it was something that the Prime Minister felt was very, very time sensitive. I wonder if you agree with that. And secondly, I wonder whether you could outline the case. A number of our viewers and listeners saying, well, hold on, this is an awful lot of public money that is going to go into UK Steel. Essentially, I mean, I think I'm probably convinced of this anyway, but I wonder if you could perhaps put the case as to what the point of saving British steel is.
Well, the point of saving British steel is to ensure that we have the ability to be able to make what's called virgin steel in our own economy, as part of our own economy. And now that everybody's much more nervous about the collapse of global trade arrangements, it's all the more important that we should be self-sufficient in being able to produce the steel we need for our ships, for our aircraft, for our bridges, for our infrastructure. And the only way you can make, effectively, you can make virgin steel is using the old blast furnace technology, which involves the use of coke, iron ore, and limestone. And we were traditionally one of the powerhouses in the world in doing this. And Scunthorpe is a world leader in producing good quality steel. So we can't afford, in my view, to do away with this essential part of the British economy. And you mentioned subsidies, but I think when you think that £1.5 billion a year is going into subsidise offshore wind, to what end, one wonders. And we've got the highest electricity costs in the Western world, which is also inhibiting our ability to be able to produce steel using the electric arc furnace technology. I think that the money invested in this is essential, frankly, and that's where the government should come in, use taxpayers' money as a last resort when we're effectively defending what is now a monopoly provider of virgin steel against Chinese interference.
And that point actually has been made by one of our texters who says, good morning, Peter. British steel should have never been sold to the Chinese in the first place. Unfortunately, important manufacturing plants and real estate has been sold off, and now they're selling the rest of the country, which is just a view that perhaps chimes with yours, Sir Christopher. I wonder if you could give us a little history lesson, just finally, Sir Christopher, about the last nationalisation debate in 1988. You were there.
Well, gosh, you're testing me out. I was there. I was at that time. I was a junior minister in Margaret Thatcher's government, and this wasn't my area of responsibility. I was dealing.
It was a big crisis, though, wasn't it? It was something that really was dominating the news and people's minds.
It was, and quite rightly so, because this is of fundamental importance to our country. We need to be able to produce steel, and we need to try and ensure that it's produced economically. And the workforce, I think, full marks to them. They are much more efficient than they used to be, much less controlled by the unions, and as a result, we should be harnessing that energy, enthusiasm, and expertise, and really backing them, and I think we've let down steel workers, particularly in Port Talbot and in other.
And that is a point actually that so many people make in regard to Port Talbot being, as many of our Welsh viewers and listeners feel, and others as well right across the country feel, was let down. I wonder how it sits with you as a Conservative to actually be essentially voting and moving towards a system that is not quite nationalisation, but almost.
Well, I don't think one must allow the ideology. Obviously, I don't believe that the state is very good at running things efficiently. But if you have what is essentially a monopoly, which needs to be maintained for national security reasons, then there's a role for the state to come in as owner of last resort, hopefully only owning it temporarily until a better solution can be found. But one of the problems we've got here is that so many government policies, misguided ones in my view, even under the last government as well, have resulted in it becoming uneconomic to make primary steel in this country, and really pretty uneconomic as well to go in for using the electric arc process as well. So we've got to get to grips with the policies which we are applying to net zero, which I think need to be completely thought through afresh.
Okay. Sir Christopher, thank you. That's Sir Christopher Chope there, the Conservative MP for Christchurch. Lots of people getting in touch about this. One person says, "Morning, Peter. This steel issue is just performative nonsense from the government. We're going to waste billions of taxpayers' money when it will never be profitable under net zero regulations. We don't mine iron ore anymore, so we have to import it to make steel. We don't mine coking coal, so we have to import it. Carbon taxes are astronomical, so how can this be a viable business with all these costs put on it?" Trevor in Harrow says, "Morning, Peter. I'm still disgusted that the government also let Port Talbot go under. I can see in the future we will desperately need the plants in Wales and the one in Scunthorpe. If I can see this even years ago, if we could see this years ago, why on earth did a so-called clever politicians let this happen?" Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. A couple more. Mark in Devon says, "Of course we need to save British steel, given that we are subversively being put on a war footing, plus all the sudden realisation that globalisation has made us inherently insecure. But the steel situation is only the tip of the iceberg. Where are the machine tool manufacturers?" he says. "Where are the armaments manufacturers? Where are the commercial vehicle manufacturers? Where are the engineers? All gone. We have left ourselves open and vulnerable to attack, both militarily and financially, and this has been blindingly obvious for many years, not just since Trump woke us all up to the situation," says Mark in Devon. Dawn in Chelmsford says, "The British steel rescue surely illustrates the idiocy of allowing so many of our important utilities to become foreign owned. Our gas, electricity and water should be owned by the UK. We are at the mercy of others." And a final thought here before the break from Paul in York, who says, "Good morning, Peter." Good morning, Paul. "I agree when the government says saving the plant was necessary for our security and our economy. However, isn't stopping illegal immigration important for the same reason?" I think you're right, Paul. What do you think of what Paul says? What do you think of what everybody else is saying, including Christopher Chope and me? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. The debate desk is coming up. Johnny Gould is on it, as is Stephen Wolfe. Stay with us.
They opened the window for ethnic minorities to apply to join the police. They then had a shorter window for white candidates to join. They then said that they would apply, accept the best candidate from those applicants. But now this Chief Constable has gone further, saying that he wants the law changed so that you can discriminate against white people.
I think his language is very clumsy. It is not unusual for any organisation, whether that's a police force or any commercial organisation, to look at certain times about recruiting certain skill sets, certain types of candidates into their organisation.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to James, who's been in touch, who says, when will they admit British Steel as a result of net zero? Amongst other things, we are now propping up a Chinese company with public money to save our steel industry. What is going to happen in 3 months, 6 months? They're keeping this industry going by using coal from Japan. Sharon in Staffordshire says, good morning, Peter. Good morning, Sharon. This government is hell-bent on always wasting taxpayers' money. How many times has the taxpayer had to bail out British Steel? Tim says, I've worked on some of the biggest steel frames. Keep all blast furnaces open. Ban all steel imports. A few more on Easter as well. We'll get to that actually a little bit later on. But let me just read from Tracy in Wakefield here. He says, good morning, Peter. I haven't bought any Easter eggs this year. This is due to not being able to find one with the word Easter on it. When will this lefty idiocy stop? Certain cultures don't celebrate Easter or give the gift of eggs, which is fair enough. But when did Easter become a dirty word? You're absolutely right. It is Palm Sunday today. Very happy Palm Sunday. It is also Passover this weekend, and a very happy Passover to Johnny Gould, who is on the debate desk. Lovely
Peter, very good morning to you. How are you doing, Stephen?
I'm very well, Johnny. Very.
But we won't pass over your opinions this weekend. Let me tell you.
We started off as we got mean to go on.
Yeah. So let's keep up the momentum.
It's all downhill from here. Stephen Wolfe is with us as well. He's director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Great to have you both in the studio. Maybe we can start with British Steel. It's interesting, Reform UK and the GMB union are united on this. They want nationalisation, not usual political bedfellows. I wonder what you think of what has happened with British Steel, Stephen.
Is that another move to the left by Reform? So I won't get in there quite early on. What I think about this is that, first of all, there are two main points. This is the culmination of the idiocy of our politics towards net zero and reducing our own infrastructure on coal. I look at three important periods of time. Hatfield Colliery and Kellingley Colliery closed in December 2015. Fiesy Fron closed in 2023. These were our last coking mines that we could have used to be actually funding cheap energy for steel, such as the factories in Taita and in Scunthorpe. We've then seen Taita Steel lose 2,800 jobs because of our view that we've got to have net zero. The idea that we're now having to face bailing out Scunthorpe because it's a national security issue for steel shows to me the lack of foresight our politicians have had in the last 20 years. Could no one see that this was the culmination of your idiocy in terms of doing this, to be able to put wind farms and solar panels across it? And I add this to one other aspect about it. We have Sizewell C, which cost us 40 billion, it was originally 20 billion, but that's going to provide electricity for 6 million homes. We have 30 million homes in the UK, so we could have had 5 Sizewell Cs providing us with virtually cheap electricity across this country, and we could have had coke being able to be provided from our own coal mines here to provide cheap energy for our own steel companies. So that way we'd have been secure. That's why I am angry about this, because I'm angry at the politicians who never looked at the facts and the evidence as it was presented to them at the time and led with a cult.
Johnny?
I think here we have another example of a Brexit dividend where we can make our own decisions. Was it not the case during the European Union membership that we couldn't make our own decisions about whether a furnace or a factory was kept alive? That decision had to be made in Brussels or Strasbourg. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So here we are. This is a huge benefit. And if anyone was in any doubt about the need for nation-state control of our society, be it in nationalisation or in private form, then here is your answer. I did watch the debate yesterday, and I am rare to agree with Plaid Cymru, but they did pop up with, what about Port Talbot?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we had calls about that, and if you have thoughts on this, if you're in Wales or you have thoughts on this,
exactly
0344 499 1000 is the number to call. What about Port Talbot? What about all the workers there? What about these other factories and blast furnaces that Stephen's talking about? There's just not equitable treatment, is there, John?
Absolutely. And it's all the support industries. I mean, we saw this in the 80s with the coal industry being shut down. Even the loyal Nottinghamshire mines were shut down, which gave birth, I think, to the Brexit Party and reform very much in the East Midlands as well. You know, those factories were shut down. Those were triumphs of the John Major era. They were kept open after 1984 and the miners' strike, which went on just one day short of a year. We absolutely need to control our own infrastructure. And there is a danger, isn't there, that the pure high-quality steel, as Ori and Duncan Smith make this point in the debate yesterday, we would be the only country who didn't make this high level of quality steel that we need. And if house building is central to this country, we need more
and it's all the stuff that goes around it in terms of the infrastructure as well.
And we will not get enough house building in the UK if we're just relying on Tata Steel, just recycling metal that we've got. So this is one of the things where we should have had a proper industrial policy, considering all these aspects. And you raise a very important point about the European Union. The European Union was behind lots of the rules and regulations that forced our governments to actually close the coal mining and close our factories, as they saw in Germany. So what we should be now facing is a look at Miliband and say, I'm sorry, what you're planning is ridiculous. Let's start looking at opening coal mines again so that we don't have to rely on the Navy going out to secure our coke coming in. We should have it here in this country, and there was over 350,000 jobs related to that in that area of the world, providing good, solid incomes for families. And that we forget too.
I wonder what you think of this story about ministers possibly, sending a story in the Sunday Times, possibly sending the Royal Navy to escort a fuel shipment to Scunthorpe's blast furnaces after Parliament vote yesterday. A senior source told the Sunday Times that the government was considering the extraordinary move to ensure the cargo reached the UK without being intercepted or redirected, Johnny.
It's absolutely essential. This is economic warfare that has been declared on us, not just today, but over the last 2 decades. I hear that China deliberately bought this not to make a profit in the UK, but to eventually close it down so that they could dump more steel upon us. It's part of an international I call it belt and braces policy of China around the world to try and dominate. I mean, Britain isn't as important as the United States, but it was presented to Donald Trump on a talk show recently that China is buying up farmland in the United States near bases. And so China has this Belt and Road policy around the world strategically to try and take over and influence its trade surplus. And here we are at the last minute. It's like an 11th hour kind of about turn. Thank goodness we see that. And I'll tell you something else which is interesting. You know, if you go into the football clubs and their traditions of industry before international globalisation, all the football clubs are famous around the country with their nicknames for what the industries were in those towns. And since and the jobs all went to China and Bangladesh in the 80s, the 90s and the noughties. So of course Scunthorpe United's nickname is the Irons. So now it'll be, you know, the Chinese takeaways.
The electoral
but I hope this is the moment where they are. Come on, you Irons.
Yeah, well, indeed.
Is what I'm wishing for today.
I remember I lived in Derby for a while, and Burton down the road, they were known as the Brewers.
That's right.
As well, because of the
and by the way,
beer.
Watford were the Brewers, and then the factory closed down. So now they're named after a sort of buzzard, like a hornet or something.
I thought they were going to be called the Elton Johns. But
that's right. Well, nothing better. Nothing better. Blue eyes.
That's it. On that note, we'll go to a break, but not before I tell you about Tony saying, don't forget the steel plant in Rotherham. Good point. Yeah. Sharon says we should be sourcing...
They're the millers, by the way.
Good knowledge. I love this. We should test you like every...
I think I'll get them all.
Everywhere in the country. We should be sourcing our gas and electric from our own country, says Sharon. Did these useless politicians not see this? And Mark and Devon says the dramatic performance of recalling Parliament yesterday was not only a joke, but a clear example of how this government has no idea about business or national security. The steel issue became a national emergency issue when Port Talbot was shut down, not just on Friday afternoon. Alarm bells should have been ringing when the UK was left with just one virgin steelmaking plant. It was so blindingly obvious at that point. Well, listen, there's lots more to come on this and lots of other issues as well, including that horrendous attack of the Manchester Arena terrorist attackers attacking 3 prison officers. We'll discuss that. We'll talk about a lot of other issues as well on the debate desk with Stephen and Johnny, so stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So we've decided to test Johnny on all of the different places where people are texting in from. So what are Plymouth called?
Plymouth are the pilgrims. It's obviously human export to America.
That's right.
Was what Plymouth Argyle was famous for. Michael Foote lived in Hampstead, and there's a pilgrim's place in Hampstead, not because it's a place of great social history, but he says, they're my football club team, and so I'm going to call them Pilgrim Close. So it was named after, he got the name changed because of his influence in British politics.
You're a mine of useless information. We've got a message from Paula in Salford. What Salford? Are they got a football team?
I think they're Salford City. They're the Red Devils. United Red Devils.
Red Devils.
Yeah, they are. For some reason.
Someone's phone's going off somewhere. Paula in Salford says Starmer was forced into acting in Scunthorpe due to the campaign that Nigel Farage has been running to save the steelworks and the thousands of jobs the works support. The voters in Scunthorpe know why Labour are just responding now. It's to try to save votes in the local elections. They can't see voters will be fooled like they weren't fooled this Thursday in Thameside when Reform UK won a safe Labour seat, taking almost 50% of the vote, says Paula.
That's been building for a while then.
Jane says many of the public have no faith in Jonathan Reynolds. He should have been sacked weeks ago. If this all goes wrong, it must be on the Prime Minister. His judgment has been questionable on most things. Leslie says, when are the unions deciding on Scunthorpe? Now the Chinese are not in charge. Wait for the cry of everybody out. And interesting from Penny in Essex, who used to work in the prison service herself. We're going to talk about this story about Hashim Abedi, absolute scumbag, who threw hot cooking oil and then started stabbing prison officers with makeshift weapons. And Penny has reacted to this story, saying, "Good morning, Peter. Having worked in the prison service, dangerous criminals should never be put in a kitchen environment where there are knives and the opportunity of using boiling fat or oil. Some negligence there, especially from someone so dangerous, serving 55 years, who has nothing to lose, yet this still happens." This is Hashim Abedi. Counter-terrorism police are investigating one of the Islamist terrorists behind the Manchester Arena bombing, allegedly attacking 3 prison officers with weapons and cooking oil in a high-security jail. 2 officers suffered life-threatening injuries after being attacked in HMP Frankland. And Frankland, I know a little bit about this because I used to work at the Ministry of Justice as a special advisor to the Justice Secretary. HMP Frankland in Durham is honestly where you put the worst of the worst of the worst, especially when it comes to Islamism and Islamic terrorism. It's near Durham. Hashim Abedi, this happened yesterday. It's a case that's going to raise questions about security, and he is serving life for the 22 murders in the Manchester Arena bombing. The Prison Officers Association has said that the officers suffered burns and stab wounds when he threw hot cooking oil over them before using makeshift weapons to stab the guards. It is just absolutely horrendous. Some of the detail on this I'm actually not going to give you at 10:30 on a Sunday morning, because I'm sure there's some children listening. But we get it. We know what's happening. We know the general picture here. Stephen, what's your reaction?
Well, I'm Mancunian. And all I can say that this individual and all of those related to the bombing and killing of those people in Manchester are scum. I said it at the time. I will continue to say it. This person is evil. And what it does show is a lack of our foresight of how to deal with these individuals. But more worrying for me is the intelligence services telling us how we are now seeing Islamic terrorists being able to groom people in prisons to create situations like this. This is a much bigger issue than just the evilness that he's done by throwing the kind of oil over people, stabbing people, and the weakness in our security related to that. But the bigger picture is how we're allowing prisons all across the country now to allow Islamists to take people in and bring them in, and having to push people into solitary confinement for their own protection, not just the individual that lots of people talk about, but the news are talking about hundreds of individuals having to go into solitary confinement.
Well, this is a really interesting issue, and it came up when I was at the Ministry of Justice as well. We're going to talk to Ian Aitchison about this a little bit later on, and Ian is the absolute expert in the UK about this. He wrote a book called Screwed. He's a former prison governor. He did a review for Michael Gove when he was Justice Secretary about terrorists in prison. And the point is that you have, as you correctly illustrate, you know, what is a terrorist? Well, we know what a terrorist is. Hashim Abedi is a terrorist. Yes. But if he goes into prison, is he going to radicalise other people? Are there people who go in for, you know, what people used to call ordinary decent crimes? I mean, I use that term very loosely and sarcastically. But, you know, if you go in for armed robbery and you come out radicalised into Islamism, well, how do we prevent that? It's a very, very big issue, John.
Absolutely. And here is an example, just to build on what you're saying. You know, these people aren't like Norman Stanley Fletcher. These aren't Mad Frankie Fraser characters from the East End who'll cut you. These are ideological criminals who want to destroy Britain and the West. This is not a normal security situation in the manner that we've dealt with violent criminals in the past. This is another level. This is the same idea as Hamas fighting Israel. They want to destroy Israel and, by extension, the whole of the Western world. And they gave him cooking oil, as your prison officer texter said earlier, which was absolute complacency. They need to be treated differently. And as you say, to actually isolate other violent criminals from those people says it all.
It comes like people like myself who was opposed to Guantanamo Bay. I wasn't really in favour of that sort of idea. But as you look at the way that this has progressed in prisons, I've actually moved my thought process that we need to have our own Guantanamo Bay, where these types of individuals, or anyone that is seen to groom individuals into this terrorist organisations, the terrorist thinking, of which security services are saying about 15% of Muslims now are of radical Islamist views. That's really concerning. Then we should have our own Guantanamo Bay to control them. That sounds extreme, but I think we are dealing with extreme circumstances, and this is a classic case of it. 22 is in there for life. But how many people did one man kill, and now they're radicalising others? We need to deal with this really, really efficiently, strongly, and without any compunction about their rights at all.
Paul has been in touch and says Her Majesty's prisons have had special units since the 1970s, starting in Scotland, where Jimmy Boyle was held, and later on in Ireland and England. They have been a tinderbox. However, appeasement is cheaper than staff. Well, certainly in Northern Ireland, as you correctly say, Paul, there have been those kind of issues. This is raising the spectre that was discussed about in David Bull's breakfast programme. I wholeheartedly disagree with the death penalty, but Nick has been in touch and says, you're so wrong on this, Peter. These prisoners are not rotting in jail. They are better looked after than the homeless and many pensioners. Prison should be prisoners should be in a cell with a mud floor, no window, and one meal a day, whilst they have colour TV, PlayStations, and access to drugs. There is no deterrent. Get real. I am against the death penalty. I don't want to be like Saudi Arabia. I don't want to be like the 15 nations of this world that kill people. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I'm not yet gone there. And the reason why I've not gone there, in the same way I don't want to see ID cards and biometric cards, is that this country is based on common law. A common law that is our culture, our view, our way of running our lives. And I don't want these people to destroy it or allow us to go down those lines. So therefore, we need to find a way that suits our culture and suits the way that we can manage and control these, which is why I'm like that woman who runs a prison in the United States who removed all rights of prisoners and said, you now have to earn your rights. So you go into prison, you have nothing, a bare cell. And if you are a good individual, then yes, you might be able to get a better blanket or a better pillow, and you build your life to show that you're a decent individual. But we keep them off the streets, we keep them locked up, and if, as I say, if it's in a Guantanamo-style prison, fine. But I don't want us yet to go down that line.
Johnny?
We have to stand by our beds in our values. Common law is but one of them,
yeah.
And our traditions, and I'm talking about a British tradition rather than an English tradition, which is tolerant,
yeah.
But is also there to defend one's values. And I think over a period of maybe 2 generations, we have become terribly complacent. We're being attacked physically, legally, our police as well. Everyone is being attacked in all sorts of different ways. You see it every day. I take my kids to school down Kilburn High Road, and there's a property on the left which says West Bank Court. I thought, oh well, maybe that's just a sort of name. And then I see a couple of yards down the road on the right, Gaza Court. I'm not going to live there.
Yeah.
And you know, there is a creeping Islamism in our society which is unchecked, or should be more checked, and these are security risks which I think we are being patsies for. We have to really guard as British people against that.
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you, Stephen. We're going to return to the debate desk after the break. We're having a little chat about someone I had a wee chat with this week, actually, on Thursday, a lawyer called Frank McGuinness. There's an element of that that's come up in regard to what Robert Jenrick is saying, the Shadow Justice Secretary. Just a bit of breaking news for you as well. More than 20 people have died after a Russian missile strike in Sumy. The acting mayor of the northern Ukrainian city reports so an attack there in northern Ukraine. We'll bring you the latest on that, of course, throughout the programme. Plenty more to discuss with Stephen and Johnny, of course. English Heritage claiming Easter is not originally Christian, and whether the lawyers representing Hamas should be struck off. Stay with us here on Talk.
For years, this is a loss-making industry, but it is crucial for our economic and actually our structural integrity in this country, literally structural integrity.
Yeah, and overall national security. We cannot be wholly dependent on other people, and we as a country cannot be wholly dependent on other people for something as crucial as this very, sort of pure steel, particularly at a time, as you say, when the government says it wants to, sort of build, be it homes, be it investing more in infrastructure and all the rest of it, and we just seem to have left ourselves terribly, terribly exposed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks so much for your company here on Talk. Luke has been in touch on Twitter. He says, let's face it, there just simply can't be a discussion of any worth about punishment while the judicial and sentencing system is absolutely in ruins. I mean, I could write large lists, but I'm sure yourself, Peter, and your listeners are all aware of many. Well, we're going to be talking a second about the grooming gang who preyed on teenage girls, the rape gang, let's call it what it is. £611,000 worth of legal aid. I'm sure you as a taxpayer are as delighted as I am that they got that money. Sandy says, your guest saying Sizewell C is the answer when no funding decision has yet been made is a bit silly. Sizewell is likely to cost $40 billion. If the government funded, a massive levy will go on our bills to recoup this, but it won't be finished for 20 years if Hinkley is anything to go by. It's the small nuclear reactors that are the solution, not massive projects like Sizewell. Ms. Nobody says, morning, it's time our politicians learnt the reason for their existence. The purpose is to keep the British public safe and protect their interests. It's not to serve themselves and put the public at risk from China or any other foreign threat. Where is the accountability? Well, there's going to be accountability at the local election, believe you me, which is happening in just a few weeks' time. Another person says, hold on a second here. They're prepared to use the Royal Navy for a boat full of coal, but not to police the channel. It's a fair point. And also Jason in the Lake District says to Johnny Gould, do you know who Rotherham are known as?
They're the Millers.
They're the Millers. Excellent. Okay, there we are.
Yeah,
Just, you know, you can never put him on the spot and I cannot know the answer. Dawn in Chelmsford says, I predict the next disaster for the UK will be the ludicrous sell-off of Royal Mail to a foreign businessman. Perhaps another government intervention is on the cards, says Dawn. Dawn, I know it's not Royal Mail. Well, no, it is Royal Mail, yes. Yeah. I was in... I bought a stamp the other day to send... one of my best friends lives in Florida. I'm going to see her later this year. And it's her birthday in a week's time. And I got a stamp. Do you know how much a stamp to send a birthday card to Florida, to America? It's £3.20. Yeah. £3.20, sorry. Yeah. And Keith in sunny Blackpool,
the Seasiders,
okay.
The Tangerines as well.
Okay, Stephen Wolfe is talking a great deal of sense, says Keith. And Howard says, where did Stephen get his great glasses?
Good point.
Go on.
I actually got these from Brussels.
From Brussels?
When I was out there in a little
Brussels
in the airport lounge.
Okay.
You know when you get all the little shots. I saw them. I thought, I quite like them.
They're snazzy. Yeah. And Howard also says, ask Johnny the nickname of Stockport County.
Stockport County are the well, it's county, but also what else is it? Stockport.
Oh, we've stumped him. Listen, this is...
I just think this is... this is just... I'm getting older. They're the nearest ground to the River Mersey.
Okay, well
there's an interesting one.
You got a factoid there.
Yeah.
Anyway, which is good. You got something out of that anyway. Johnny, it's a very important time for you and your family and your people because it's Passover this weekend. A very happy Passover to any Jewish people who are watching or listening. But English Heritage claiming Easter is not originally Christian. They might be factually right here. I don't know who really knows about these things. But similarly, surely, English Heritage should be supporting Easter with great gusto.
Absolutely. No one can argue that paganism existed before Christianity or even Judaism. Certainly Islam is only 1400 years old. So they're technically correct. But the concept, the thought process, the cultural tradition of Easter is very much Christian. And it was born out of Jesus, who was Jewish. The Last Supper is reputedly the first night of Seder, which there was only one night of Passover Seder in ancient Israel.
Although I've always wondered, why were they all sitting on the same side of the table? That's my question.
Yeah, that's right. Probably because it was painted 1,000 years after the event. They weren't there. There's no photographic evidence. But as if to prove its emergence from Catholic tradition, in Spain and Portugal it's called Pascua, which is a bit like Pesach, which is the Hebrew word for Passover, and in Portugal and France, Pâques in France as well. So look, people imbibe the traditions of where they came from, but to call it anything but a Christian festival is to attempt foolishly to delegitimise Christianity. And I'm not even a Christian, and I say, stop it, stand by your beds, Christian people, you know, stick by your traditions.
Well, we've got, you know, we had someone messaging earlier on saying they can't find an Easter egg with the word Easter on it.
That's a shame.
It's just, you know.
We had a school recently in Hampshire, as we know, that actually banned Easter, but is quite happy to go with aid and support that. I think you're right, Johnny, in terms of the way that we look at Eostra as the name. It was Danish, it was kind of a cross, but it was only a small part of paganism. It only dealt with some elements of tribes. It didn't even deal with the spread across the country. The really importance about that is when we started to have English kings around 800, coming Calvinised under Alfred.
They were all called Ethel, weren't they?
Yeah, Ethel. There was one called Ceolwulf, which I just think is superb with the name Wolf.
That's it.
So I was once the ancestor of a king of England. I like to dream on that.
You better take it.
Although when you were younger, presumably you called yourself Teen Wolf.
Yeah, I used to know what the time was.
Hey, very good. When you were sadly a little bit tardy one time when you were going in for one of these interviews, and I said, "Don't worry, the wolf's at the door."
I'm all right now. We're going to go. Anyway, we get in trouble.
Anyway, we will.
The real important part about it is that we're seeing an element of our elites, whether it's in our cultural institutions, that wish to delegitimise the historical elements of our Christian and Christian Judeo culture. And it all seems to fit in with this idea that you're no longer English. I remember Barbara Roche, and I'm writing a book on, you know, this island is an island of immigrants. Well, it's not. Britain is not an island of immigrants. It's an island that was formed as a nation state. At that point, we developed Judeo-Christian religion based on a cultural aspect that is shown by our DNA right up till now, but they deny it.
Yeah.
And denying of your culture leads to openness, which leads to its destruction. If we don't have common bonds together and common ideals, how do we stick together and face the challenges of our future? And we've got big challenges at the moment. And that's why you have this divide between those who stab and burn oil over and put oil over our guards because they don't believe in our culture, and then we've got our own insiders who are trying to destroy our culture. We need to stand strong, as Johnny said.
Even the egg, right, is inalienable in Judeo-Christian traditions. So they can take the Easter out of their Cadbury's egg all they want, but the egg is the idea of spring and rebirth. It's part of Christianity.
Yeah.
And by the way, at the Seder night last night, I had an egg in salt water as part of the dinner, which was the rebirth of our nation. On the Seder plate, there is an egg about the world being imperfect, and one day it will be better. It comes through. So they can take Easter out of it all they want, but the Christians and the Jewish people are there to remind us that actually even the symbols of the egg are, you know, take away your doing what you can't, because the egg is a Christian and Jewish concept as well at this time of year.
What about English Heritage as an organisation, Stephen, bringing this up and talking about this?
They're just going to be heritage soon, aren't they?
When was When was the last time you heard English Heritage say, do you know what? Jesus, God, the miracle of Easter, an incredibly important thing to English people, and that to many English people and many other people right around the world who are Christian. Christianity is the dominant religion in the UK, therefore we're going to do all we can to celebrate it and to help those people celebrate their tradition, which to many Christians, I know I'm agnostic, but I have many Christians here very close to me. One in my family is very, you know, it's a really, really important thing. She is not watching this at the moment because she is at church, and to her Easter is actually more important than Christmas.
Yes, Easter is more important than Christmas for many people because they see the commercialisation of Christmas, but they see the importance of Easter. And I don't see English heritage, I don't see the National Trust, I don't see our museums celebrating what is really a fundamental part of our nation. All they ever seem to do is look backwards and say how evil we were. Look at the slave trade. Look, nothing about the fact that we've had a people in this country who have been championing freedoms from the levellers and the diggers and the Tolpuddle martyrs, all of those people, one after another, celebrating freedom, democracy, liberal values based on the Christian Judeo values our nation, starting with common law. We talked about that already. Why are we not celebrating all of those? And Easter is an incredibly important part of that. I will always defend it, I will always fight for it, but I feel that sometimes I go and I live in Winchester, where we have one of the most beautiful cathedrals in the country, and even they don't seem to celebrate it in the same way.
Just let's play a couple of voice notes and hear from our viewers and listeners. Karen's been in touch regarding what you've been saying, Stephen, on prisons. This is what Karen has to say.
Hi, Peter. I agree with Stephen Wolfe, who talks a lot of sense, by the way. Got a lot of admiration for that man and Johnny. They're brilliant, the pair of them. He is right. I mean, you know, you're separating prisoners for their own protection. You should be separating the Islamists in solitary confinement so they cannot groom anybody. Why is it that other people are being put in solitary confinement and they're being left to groom even more people? I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, prisoners have got nothing but time on their hands. They're disaffected anyway with the world, and this is what's happening. No, you put the Muslim radicaliser in solitary confinement for the whole of their sentence. That's how I would deal with it.
And that is a point I would imagine many people would agree with. Do you agree with that, Stephen?
I absolutely do. And what I don't want to see is what we happen in the United States, where you see the white nationalists with the black nationalists, with the Muslim nationalists, with the Mexican nationalists, all in different groups, doing deals with each other and then deciding who's going to kill who along the way. And then you look at South America, where you see the same sort of gangs separated within a prison construct, or even one prison just totally dominated, and if someone comes in, and that's what's happening in our country. We should not be allowing that to happen in our country.
Glenn in Suffolk has been in touch regarding Johnny's thoughts. This is what Glenn says.
Hi, Peter. What Johnny Gould said there, absolutely spot on. Couldn't have put it better myself. We need to stick with our values, and he's so right when he says the last 1 or 2 generations we've just let it slide and we've become incredibly complacent. And if we don't get a handle on this soon, this country's going to go pop, and it won't be nice. Have a good day.
Thanks very much indeed, Glenn. Yes, an optimistic note on which to
we will have a good day, I promise.
Yes. Speaking of optimistic, lovely, cuddly, marvellous people, I just want to play you a little clip from someone I encountered this week, and it was an interesting encounter, a bit of a chat with a guy called Frank McGuinness. Now, a lot of people have been in touch about this, and thank you for that. I did say I wasn't going to mention it again, but actually Robert Jenrick has now said that he believes that Mr McGuinness and 2 of his colleagues should be struck off as barristers. Let's just remind ourselves how it went with Frank McGuinness on Thursday during my drive time programme. You have told me that you have decided to represent Hamas. They are an unspeakably horrific and dreadful organisation.
Oh,
so
you're
yes,
doing it again?
yes, I am associating you with them because you've decided to represent them.
Okay, I think you might be hearing from the police. I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like you might. The low point on the Irish side of the Irish Sea is Pat Finucane, of course, right? A British MP stood up in Parliament and said he's just like his clients. Pat Finucane represented members of the Provisional IRA, which is another proscribed organisation. And 3 weeks later, Pat Finucane was, of course, murdered in front of his family by loyalist paramilitaries who we now know had handlers in the British establishment. So you are playing the same game. Don't talk over me.
Let's talk about Hamas. I'll talk over if you want to. No, excuse me.
You're playing the same game. You put
I'm not playing any games. I'm not playing any games.
You just put a target on my back.
I'm not putting a target on anybody's back. I am asking you. No, I don't.
You owe me an apology.
No, I don't. I'm asking you why you've decided. Why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Next question.
Am I getting it clear, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you believe that Hamas have a right to use armed force to represent their position?
You keep asking me what I believe, which again is it's not quite as blatant and disgusting as your previous question. But
what's interesting
it's not about what I believe.
Hamas said, well, I mean, you're representing these people and you've chosen to do so, so presumably it has something to do with what you believe.
Do you not understand how the legal system works?
Yes, I do, and I understand that you didn't have to take the case. If I were a lawyer and if someone came to me, I would say there's not in a million years would I represent Hamas. They are a disgusting, horrendous, anti-Semitic, dreadful terrorist organisation. That's what I would say. You didn't say that, and I'm very interested as to why.
Because you're trying to make the story about me instead of this important application because you're not a serious journalist, is that right?
So there we are. Anyway, we now have Robert Jenrick, who is the Shadow Justice Secretary. He has called for what he calls a thorough and transparent investigation of Riverway law by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and in a letter to the watchdog he has said there's a clear need to uphold public confidence in the legal profession and ensure rigorous enforcement of the UK sanctions regime. Just a quick thought on this from Stephen and then Johnny.
Well, I am a barrister, so I have to apply by the cab rank rule, and if he'd have made that statement that he was forced to by the cab rank rule, then one would understand it. But as we all know in chambers, you can make way in which you accept cases or not accept cases if you so wish. You can say your case is overrunning, or you've got to go on a holiday. So,
but he said to me in the interview, so this is not to do with the cab rank rule at all.
So that's one particular thing. I think the problem with him was the way that he might be looked upon by the Borough Council for the aggressive responses that he gave in some ways. And in one instance he said he wasn't giving his own personal opinion, but then he talked about Zionism and the way that Israel was committing terrorism and genocide. Well, he may well have said that's our opinion in the report, but he didn't. So that's where he may fall foul. But we've got to be very careful. Barristers do need to be protected in the same way. So there's both sides of that.
Just a quick answer from Johnny,
He did volunteer himself to be interviewed, so it wasn't really your question that was putting a target on his back, but his volunteer position to be.
Well, I don't want any target to be on anybody's back.
No,
but
indeed.
Certainly,
he chose to take the interview as well as the case.
Yeah, OK, thank you both very, very much indeed. That's Johnny Gould and Stephen Wolfe. I've really enjoyed myself this morning. Been very good, actually. A lot of fun and common sense spoken as well. Let me know what you think about what Stephen and Johnny have said, and about the fact that there are so many stories around. We're going to talk in just a second, actually, about those prison officers who've been attacked. The national chairman of the Prison Officers Association will be with us, as will Ian Aitchison, who is the expert on terrorism in prisons and terrorists in prison. Let us know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Back in a moment.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting his front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet, and it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson had been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell with you for the next couple of hours. There's a lot around to talk about this morning. We've had an excellent debate desk with Johnny Gould and Stephen Wolfe. Let me know what you think about what they are saying. Give me your calls as well, 0344 499 1000. Lots of people getting in touch about what's happened in HMP Frankland, the prison that has been housing many of the most dangerous offenders in this country. A lot of sympathy for the prison officers who have been attacked overnight. We're going to be speaking to the national chairman of the Prison Officers Association in a second, and then Ian Aitchison, who's a former prison governor. He is the expert in the UK on terrorism and terrorists in prison. There's lots to discuss on this. It's a really, really worrying case because the Manchester Arena terrorist has attacked 3 prison officers. How has this been allowed to happen? What is their status in terms of how they're doing? We'll find out all of that in just a second. We'll also talk about this hour about a member of a grooming gang receiving legal aid, over £600,000 of your money. And later on in the programme, we're going to talk about English Heritage claiming Easter is not originally Christian. They may be factually right, but should they be making that point a week before Easter? Let us know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 here on Talk. Lots of messages coming in. I just want to read one before I go to Mark Fairhurst, and that is from Angela, who says, your panel was excellent today, Peter. The stabbing at the prison seems similar to the attack in Southport where the neck and face are targeted. This must be terrifying for prison workers. I'm surprised anyone works there. This surely warrants another day in Parliament on Monday. Well, Parliament came back yesterday. Very rare thing for it to happen on a Saturday. That was because of Scunthorpe and the steel crisis there. We'll talk about that as the programme goes on. But let's talk and get the detail now about the fact that Hasham Abedi is alleged to have thrown hot cooking oil and then started stabbing with makeshift weapons prison officers, and 2 officers suffering life-threatening injuries after being attacked at HMP Frankland in Durham. We'll learn a bit more about HMP Frankland. I used to work in the Ministry of Justice. I was a special advisor there for a while, and I know that HMP Frankland has some of the most evil people in our society who are incarcerated there. But are they incarcerated there safely, especially for those brave prison officers who work with them every day? Let's talk to Mark Fairhurst first. He is the national chairman of the Prison Officers Association. Mark, how are these officers? How is their health?
So 3 officers were obviously subject to a vicious and cowardly assault. They all ended up in hospital. Luckily, one of them has been discharged with severe burns and scalds. The other 2, unfortunately, have been kept in hospital overnight, and I would imagine they will still be in throughout the week because they have been stabilised, luckily, but they have suffered quite significant stab injuries.
And that is just absolutely horrendous. Our thoughts are with them and their families at the moment. There is no one who is a prison officer in this country, and it's a very, very tough job, and it's not a well-paid job at all, who should be subject to this absolutely horrendous treatment. How is this allowed to happen?
I think that's something that the review of separation centres will now identify. I'm absolutely infuriated that prisoners who are held in a separation centre, let's not forget, these are the most prolific and dangerous terrorists in society and in our prison system. They are allowed the same freedoms and privileges as normal location inmates. There is no way on this earth that that type of prisoner with that type of threat and risk should be allowed to access cooking facilities with implements that can be fashioned into weapons to use against staff. We need to robustly manage these prisoners, and let's be honest, if you're in a separation centre, you're there for a reason. All we need to do is contain you and control you and give you your basic entitlements. Nothing more.
And that is what a number of people will believe. The Justice Secretary, Shabna Mahmood, said on Twitter, I am appalled by the attack of 3 brave officers at HMP Frankland. My thoughts are with them and their families. The police are now investigating. I will be pushing for the strongest possible punishment. Violence against our staff will never be tolerated. But the fact is, violence is tolerated against your officers, isn't it? It is tolerated. It's part of the system. It shouldn't be, though.
I'm heartened by her statement, but actions speak louder than words, and we will be writing to Shabana tomorrow to request an urgent meeting with her, because we've been calling for several years now for staff on the front line to be issued with stab-proof vests. And if stab-proof vests would have been worn yesterday, the injuries would have been significantly reduced. But the reason we get from our employer for not giving us stab-proof vests, you're not going to believe this. This is how timid the leadership is. If we issue you with stab-proof vests, you'll look too militaristic and you may intimidate the prisoners.
You may intimidate the prisoners. Well, there are plenty of prisoners, Mark, and you know far better than I do. There are plenty of prisoners who have made a career, quite literally, of intimidating and causing misery for people. If they're intimidated by prison officers, I am sleeping fine in my bed at night.
Well, Peter, I have to ask you and all the grannies watching this, do you feel intimidated when you go to Tesco for your Sunday shop and the security guard at the entrance is dressed like RoboCop? All we're asking for is a professional-looking stab-proof vest to protect us on the front line. We deserve the same protections as the police. The police go into the same hostile situations that we do. But think about our workplace. It's confined. We know the potential, we know the threat, and we know what people are being convicted of, yet we haven't got the same level of protection. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Peter, things have got to change, and staff safety has got to go paramount and come first.
Mark, please send the best wishes of everyone watching and listening to those prison officers and their families. We hope they recover. We hope they're able to get back to work and rebuild their lives after what I'm sure is a horrendous attack, both the physical injuries and the mental injuries as well. Thanks for the work you're doing. Good luck with the Justice Secretary. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be given stab vests for your members, and thank you for joining us today. I know it's been a busy weekend for you. Mark Fairhurst there, National Chairman of the Prison Officers Association. Well, Ian Aitchison is a former prison governor himself. He is the author of a book called Screwed. He is an expert on both terrorists and terrorism in prisons. I could go on and on talking about his qualifications for this interview, let me tell you. How on earth was this allowed to happen, Ian?
Well, good morning, Peter. And can I just say, I agree with absolutely everything Mark Fairhurst has said. Mark and I probably come from a different political perspective, but we're absolutely united on this. This is a ghastly attack on some of the most bravest public servants we have. People working up close and personal all the time with the most highly dangerous national security risks of the country, and they're not properly defended. They are poorly led, and it's simply, the case that they're not being looked after by the state, and the state has an obligation to protect those people when they pull on a uniform in the morning. National security does not stop at the prison gate. We have an obligation to those men and women in uniform who've been grievously hurt to protect them as much as possible, and it's inconceivable what Mark has been saying about the response that he's been getting on behalf of his members about stab vests. I mean, it's just extraordinary, but it's certainly believable because I've come up against such ideological claptrap as well in the past. And, if you go to one of the most progressive prison systems in the world, Canada, they've managed to issue their frontline corrections officers with stab vests that actually fit in and blend very well with their uniforms. This is not beyond the wit of man to do, to give basic protection to our staff. But I mean, to your point about how has this been allowed to happen? Well, I think I've got some skin in the game here, Peter, because I was the person that recommended separation centres be set up in 2015. I certainly did not intend that they were, to be configured in such a way as to allow people like Hasham Abedi, with the record he has, to have access to make improvised weapons and to have oil at hand to boil and throw over prison staff. These separation centres were supposed to be a national security response to the fact that what I discovered in 2015 and, the government's terror watchdog, Jonathan Hall, discovered in 2023 when he did a report was the influence of Islamist extremists, ideologues and hate preachers and proselytizers in close proximity to highly dangerous and violent young men serving long sentences was intolerable and had to be stopped. So separation centres were designed to totally incapacitate those few people identified by intelligence who were intent on, if you like, continuing their jihad. And the targets, of course, in that scenario, when you're serving, as Abedi is serving 55 years in prison, I doubt he'll ever come out, except in a box. The targets become the men and women who are looking after you. And it's a complete dereliction of duty to surrender control so far and to pander to these people so much that they're able to attack the very people who are doing this job on behalf of society. Heads should roll. They won't, of course, because there is no accountability culturally in the prison service for things like this to happen. You know, I mean, only last week, Peter, we were hearing from a reputed barrister who was in Frankland prison, who was saying, his clients were telling him the place was overrun by Islamist extremists working in gangs to control power and space. How is it possibly being allowed to happen? I mean, senior people must answer questions. And if they can't answer those questions, Shabana Mahmood needs to replace them.
Well, Shabana Mahmood has said, "I'm appalled by the attack of 3 brave officers at HMP Frankland. My thoughts are with them and their families. The police are now investigating. I will be pushing for the strongest possible punishment. Violence against our staff will never be tolerated." What do you make of that statement? Do you believe her?
Vapid response that violence will not be tolerated. It is on a backdrop of excessive and extreme violence, record levels of violence against prison staff, that the senior leadership of the prison service seem unwilling or unable to tackle. There's been a massive increase year on year on assaults on staff just now, not simply in our high security prisons, but across the whole system. These people are not defended. Now, Mark wasn't able to tell you, but I can. Just to remind your listeners, Peter, the prison officers are not permitted to strike. Now, in return for that, there should be a reasonable expectation that these men and women going to work are properly protected. And if they're not properly protected, I think we've come within seconds and millimetres of a fatality here. If you're a prison officer going to a high security prison the day after a colleague has been murdered, I'm pretty sure that is, how you break the rule of law inside prisons, because you would naturally and quite reasonably say, I'm not prepared to work in an environment like this where my life is literally in danger. And what happens then? I mean, do you call the police? What police? Do you get the army in? What army? This is, terrorists watch these guys day in and day out. They've got nothing to do all day, particularly those who've been thwarted in their attacks and banged up for many years. They've nothing to do but try to watch the routines, the patterns, and the weaknesses of prison staff and condition them. And we have to have a security response to that threat which is commensurate with it, not some sort of coddling of these people. We've got to stop thinking about these people in terms of their human rights primarily, and start thinking about them in terms of the massive harm that they can do to others. And Hashim Abedi was waving a sea of red flags when he came to Frankland. Already had attacked prison staff. The response from the prison service is not good enough, and the Justice Secretary must get a grip on this situation.
Let me give you a sense of what our viewers and listeners are saying. Ian, Sally in Islington says, "I can't believe what I just heard. Prison officers don't even have stab vests. That is beyond shocking. In my opinion, they should have armed prison officers to deal with situations like this." Paul says, "New ways of working introduced to the prison service not so many years ago, decimated staff, budgets, recruitment processes and staff retention. Her Majesty's prisons have been allowed to move backwards for years." Lots of people supporting what you're saying as well, Ian, and I just wonder what you make of those comments.
Those comments are absolutely right. I mean, ordinary people that don't have a window into this world apart from when catastrophes like this happen will be absolutely astonished that we're not giving our frontline prison staff basic protections. I mean, you've got a culture in the prison service. Let's not forget. Mark talked about senior bureaucrats saying stab vests are too militaristic. You've got a culture where the people are just not able to, and have no sort of operational sight of what's going on in the front line, sitting in the kind of ivory towers of prison service headquarters. We've got a two-tier system at the moment, which I can't find any record of being replicated anywhere in the world, where you've got a uniformed cadre of frontline staff and then a boss class in civilian clothes. And I remember being told when I challenged this by senior people in the Prison Governors Association that the reason that governors didn't wear a uniform is because prisoners needed a right of appeal beyond the uniformed organisation. And that just makes me think, well, you've got the wrong people working for you.
Yeah, that's not the point. That's not the point.
There is a gulf.
Yeah.
There's a gulf, Peter. There's a massive gulf between the boss class in the prison service and the operational front line. And what you were seeing, unfortunately, yesterday is the outworking of that complete disconnect. We need people working at the top of the prison service who've got operational skills, who will bring this service back into control. Because unless, you know, and I'm a liberal in a way when it comes to these things, unless you have fundamentally order and control across your prison system, nothing else hopeful can happen. Rehabilitation remains a fantasy word.
Ian, thank you. That is Ian Aitchison there, former prison governor himself, author of a book called Screwed about the prison system. It is published by Biteback, which I should declare as my own publisher as well for my own book. And also he is someone who did a review of terrorism in prisons for the Justice Secretary a few years ago for Michael Gove when he was Justice Secretary. There is so much to talk about on this issue. Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. That's the number Ken in Manchester has dialed. Ken, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
It's nice to speak to you. Lovely show as usual.
Thank you, Ken.
It's regarding these prisons that we've got today. The problem is, in my opinion, you've done a crime. You should actually do the time, and it should be like they did in the Victorian days. If you want to eat, you've got to do hard labour. That means anything from the treadmill to work.
Well, we don't want to starve prisoners, Ken, do we? We want to. I mean, I think there are 4 things we should give prisoners, and let me know what you think of this. I think we should give them shelter. I think we should give them food. I think we should give them water, and I think we should give them medical attention. You know, those 4 are basically non-negotiable, aren't they, Ken?
That's absolutely correct. But with televisions, all the rest of it that they get in, they've done a crime. You've got to actually do the time, and also, you know, pay your bet back to society. I'm sure if these people had to do what they did in the Victorian days, okay, they were fed on bread and water and probably some fruit to stop, you know, disease, but they've got to know that they won't want to come back again. They'll be good boys.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. It's got to be a deterrent, isn't it? But I suppose,
absolutely.
I mean, this is the thing, though. If you're serving life for 22 murders, if you're serving life for 22 murders like this scumbag Hashem Abedi, you think you've just got nothing to lose.
Well, yeah, exactly. So what we've got to do with the fella, make every day hell for him. Put him in a solitary confinement, in a cell, with a blanket, a toilet, and that's him. Leave him there and feed him through a letterbox every day and let him know that he's not going to get away with it. And if people see this, they're going to think, hang on, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be a good boy. I think that's what you've got to do.
Okay.
And the other thing I think would be great to put people into place is to bring back national service. If everybody did national service, I did. I cried when I went in and I cried when I come out because it made a man of me. It makes you understand the values and you put something back into this world before you take it out.
Yeah.
And there's too many people now who think it's their rights, their thing to have everything, cars, phones, whatever. They should bloody well work for it, excuse the language. They should work for it.
Okay. Ken, thanks for your thoughts there. I think a lot of people will agree with you. Chris has been in touch on WhatsApp text messages. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, 0344 499 1000. That's the number to ring that Ken has rung. There's also a number for voice notes. We'll take those in a second. Chris says, the prison system is like everything else. When everyone is to blame, nobody is to blame. It's the perfect system used by major companies. Something has to change when it comes to accountability. Today's guests have been very level-headed and interesting folks so far. Thanks, Chris. That can always change. Of course, you never know. Susan has been in touch as well and says, how much is the government and taxpayers' cash going to English Heritage, the National Trust and other anti-British organisations? They hate this country and are working to destroy our culture. Defund them, says Susan. Another person says we should have ex-military as police officers and they should be paid accordingly instead of the pittance they are paid. Lots of people getting in touch on Easter as well. Including Steve, who says, if Easter is not part of British heritage, why do they insist on every other religious festival to be respected? Diwali, Ramadan and so on, to my knowledge, have nothing at all to do with British heritage. Steve, I have absolutely no problem with Ramadan being celebrated. Eid, Passover, Johnny was talking about there, and Diwali as well. We had a Hindu Prime Minister in Rishi Sunak who celebrated Diwali in Downing Street. the world continued to turn. You know, no big issues here. But yeah, Easter, look, we are a predominantly Christian culture and a predominantly Christian country. Not a huge number of people in comparison to the population of the country actually go to church on a weekly basis and would see themselves as, you know, having Jesus directing their lives, as I believe, you know, Christianity really is, even though I'm agnostic. But the point is, I suppose, that Easter is a very, very important festival to the country and to Christians, and I have no compunction whatsoever in saying, no reservation in saying that it should be celebrated. And I'm worried when organisations such as English Heritage decide that we shouldn't perhaps celebrate it in the same way, or alternatively that it should be questioned, or we should be looking into the origins of it, or bringing up the fact that originally it was a pagan festival. Well, yes, but it's been appropriated, and rightly so, as a Christian festival, and of course it celebrates the most important part of the Christian year. Some people say that's Christmas, of course, when Jesus was born, but actually it's about the whole miracle of Easter, the miracle of being put to death by the Romans and then rising again after 3 days. That is what Easter is about. Plus you get lovely Easter eggs, and they are quite delicious. The latest in Ukraine, just before the break, the death toll in Sumy has risen to 24. And people are now reporting, the emergency services, that 24 people have been killed in the strike on Sumy, including 1 child. Another 84 people have been injured, including 7 children. That is in northern Ukraine. We'll bring you any developments on that as time goes on. We'll take some of your calls in a minute too. Stay with us.
People don't intervene, that staff and colleagues don't sort of charge in there. Even if they manage to sort of catch someone, there's a question of what happens if the police take hours to arrive. How are you meant to, you know, hold someone there? So it's a really difficult situation. And alongside this rise in theft is a rise in violence and abuse against shop workers, which is really concerning. Over 2,000 incidents every single day against shop staff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of issues. Chris in Ottershaw. Chris, I haven't heard from you in a little while. It's great to hear from you again. Good morning, Peter. I believe that the attempt to cancel Easter is just one element of a campaign by brainwashed wokists to destroy Englishness. It's a long march through the institutions by traitors to this country, and I include mass immigration as part of this treacherous campaign, says Chris. Another person says, diversity, it's accepting all cultures, and that's our strength apparently. Well, suddenly Easter is considered stealing other cultures. So what exactly is the goal here? Inclusion can't be achieved by exclusion. Very, very good point there. Mark in Devon says, with the decision of English Heritage and the Hampshire School to name but 2 organisations, plus the influx of foreign religions, I predict a time in the not too distant future where the vast majority of the population who identify as atheists will suddenly become Christians, if only in name. This will be because it will be other Christians against some of the other religions in this country. The indigenous population are being forced to choose a side. Dark times are ahead, I feel, if we don't stop this now. Just a little reflection on the debate desk earlier on today by Catherine. That was about an hour ago with Johnny And Stephen and Catherine says Johnny and Stephen were brilliant as usual. It was also uplifting to listen to mature, experienced people who made their points without indulging in hysteria, as is sometimes the case with panel members. Surely not, Catherine. Sarah says, I feel like screaming at that despicable lawyer again, says Sarah. Welcome to my world. Right then, Ian in East Grinstead is going to give us a voice note now on the death penalty.
Hi Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. I was listening to you and David Bull exchanging viewpoints on the death penalty, and then you covered the story about the gentleman who's, or the terrorist I'm going to call him, who threw cooking oil and stabbed prison guards. Surely he's the prime example of someone who should have the death penalty. Why would we want to keep someone like that to cause further harm to individuals?
Ian, I am not in any way, shape or form, and never ever would defend anybody like Hashim Abedi. He is a total scumbag. He should be in prison for the rest of his life. He's a ghastly person. He's thrown, and not only has he destroyed the lives of those people at the Manchester Arena, their families who will grieve for years and will be re-traumatised today by this news story. This man's name in the news, throwing hot cooking oil over prison officers, stabbing them, ruining the lives of 3 more people. The physical scars will be there, the mental scars will be there for them and their family. I know why you're saying that, Ian, and I understand the frustration here, and I understand why many people are in favour of the death penalty. But in my view, and you're happy, I'm very happy to debate this with people. People want to ring me, 0344 499 1000. Tell me I'm wrong. Drop me a voice note, that's absolutely fine. On my programme, we disagree without being disagreeable. But the point is that I don't want to be like Saudi Arabia. I don't want to be like the 15 countries in this world that put people to death. I don't think it's a deterrent. I don't think it puts people off. I don't think it solves anything. I think as a civilised country, we should keep people alive, and actually we should let them rot in prison in reasonable conditions. I think, as I say, food, shelter, water and medical attention should be given to every prisoner. Beyond that, I think there's a debate, and I'm happy to have it. 0344 499 1000. In regard to Parliament's recall on the steel issue, Nick has been in touch from Loughborough.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. I think we've just seen the most disgraceful display of political posturing with this emergency debate and vote yesterday, which could have all been conducted in normal parliamentary time, but Starmer chose to theatricise it in order to deflect from all the terrible things that are going on in this country, in particular the denial of a grooming gangs inquiry. I think this was political posturing at its very worst.
Believe me, we're going to talk about those gangs, those rape gangs, very, very shortly, because the grooming gang who preyed on teenage girls in Rotherham, how much legal aid did they get? £600,000. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but first of all, I want to play one more voice note. Then I want to talk to Dave in Cambridge, who's waiting on the line. Let's hear first of all from Anna in Surrey.
Peter, nobody dislikes the Islamic world more than myself. I'm very open about that. However, what I do like is the law. The law must remain neutral. The fact that you do not like these people does not mean that they should not be allowed, if they are funding it themselves, to present their case to a court of law. By doing that, Peter, you are becoming tyrannical. And that is to be seen clearly in the case of Tommy Robinson, Lucy Connolly, Julie Sweeney, and God rest his soul, Peter Lynch. They were victims of Keir Starmer utilising the law for his own spite and his own agenda. And we do not want to go down that road, Peter. So as much as I dislike these people, they should be allowed to present their case to a court of law. Thank you.
Anna, thanks for your thoughts. Presenting their case at a court of law, how do you do that? Where does the legal representation come from? And that's actually what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes' time, because the Rotherham monsters getting £600,000 of legal aid, well, actually, is that something that should happen? Because everyone's entitled to a defence. let me know your thoughts. Anna, you can drop me another voice note if you want to. Anyone else is welcome to get in touch. 0344 499 1000. George in Wakefield is in touch and has been very, very critical of the prison service. And another person who has some views on this is Dave in Cambridge. And Dave is on the line now. Dave, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about this issue?
Thank you very much, Peter. What I want to say is I'm an ex-prison officer. I did over 30 years in the prison service. My view personally is somebody must be responsible for who gave him access to hot cooking oil. It would have never happened in my day. I'm very, very sorry, but it's absolutely ridiculous to think that he had permission, a top security prisoner had permission to go in, get hot oil, which he was able to throw over staff. I mean, where were the staff? What's going on? I mean,
well, I mean, a lot of people, not just
Sorry.
people with your level of expertise and experience after 30 years in the prison service, Dave. You know, me as a sort of, I know a bit about the prison service. I used to work for the Ministry of Justice, but I don't know that much about it. And even on a very basic common sense level, you don't allow very, very evil, incredibly hateful Islamic terrorists to have access to hot cooking oil. And look, the stabbing implements as well are a big issue of concern, and I'm sure the investigation will look into that. But when you were in the prison service, Dave, how did you keep yourself safe in all of this? Because there'll be a lot of prison officers, maybe even watching and listening today, who will just be feeling a little bit less secure and happy about their jobs when they hear of these horrendous incidents.
Well, basically, you have to be able to defend yourself and look after yourself. But I mean, that's no, I mean, now we're getting like lots of women in the prison service. We're getting different aspects. All good officers, don't get me wrong, they're all good officers, but there's horses for courses. In those top security, when I worked in top security, I had tough men around me, and they were good men. You know, you need to sort of move your staff to where they're best suited. And this is a thing that's not actually being done. You know, you can't really shove somebody in. You can't expect a little woman in a high security unit and expect her to deal with somebody who's gone completely off the rails.
Some people will say it's a controversial opinion to say that, but actually, I mean, I'm not saying for a second you're sexist. I don't feel I'm a sexist. Maybe people might think differently, but there are very clear physical differences between men and women, aren't there? And that is something that the prison service has to deal with, especially when you're dealing with the male estate and male prisoners who are physically larger and stronger than female prison officers.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the like of this Charles Bronson guy here in England who they've kept locked down, that kept him under real tight security the whole time. And his crime was nothing compared to Habibi's crime.
Yeah.
You know, it was nothing. And how are they letting these guys run about the landing even, unsupervised? You know, that there has to be somebody responsible. Yeah. And
do you think
we're getting this woke agenda? We're getting this woke agenda in prisons now, whereas, we'll let them do this, we'll let them do that. And everything you give becomes a bonus to them. Then they get more and more and more.
Dave, I've got to go to a break, but I just want to ask you very briefly, do you think there will be any form of accountability for this?
No.
Okay, well, that's a brief and clear answer, and I appreciate it. Dave, thank you for your thoughts. That's Dave in Cambridgeshire there. He's a former prison officer himself, 30 years in the service. We're going to talk more about this as time goes on. We'll talk more about Easter, and we're going to talk about the grooming gang. One of these scumbags, Mohammed Imran Ali Akhtar, who's 43, was sentenced to 23 years in jail. How much legal aid did he get? How much of your money, taxpayers' money, to pay his legal bills did he get? £143,696. Just have a little think about that as we go to a break. We'll talk about it in just a few minutes here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has got in touch, including one person calling themselves 5 Star, who says Muslims celebrate Ramadan, so we can celebrate Easter in a country that's more Christianity-based. Yeah, I have no problem with both of those festivals being celebrated by the people who want to celebrate them. I went to an Eid dinner once with a friend of mine who's Muslim, invited me to her family's Eid dinner. It was delicious, let me tell you. I wasn't necessarily celebrating Eid, but it was a very nice thing to be welcomed to. I love Easter as well, mainly the chocolate. Harry says, I'm sorry, but it's not just oil, but prisoners have electric kettles in their cells. Hot water mixed with sugar is also very nasty. Weapons can be made from anything. That's part of the danger and risks we have all the time. Sadly to say, nothing will change. And another small issue is stop calling prison officers guards. We are prison officers, full stop. Thank you, from Harry. I wasn't aware I had called them guards, but maybe some people are doing that. Maybe I did that. Apologies for doing that. They are prison officers, as you say. Happy to give them their correct title. Nikki in Huntingdon says, my son is a prison officer. My future son-in-law also. I worked as an OSG. I don't know what OSG stands for. Officer something. What does OSG stand for in a prison? I'm not sure. I'm also XRUC, Royal Ulster Constabulary. I certainly know what that stands for, the police service in Northern Ireland, before it changed its name. There's no reason why officers could not wear body armour under their shirts. I would pay for the families myself. So Nikki says, sorry, give me that again one more time. Operation Support Grade OSG in a prison. Thank you to producer Chris for telling me that in my ear. Sometimes people send through, I know what BBC means, I know what RUC means, but sometimes people send through acronyms and things and they know what it is, but I just don't know, especially when you're dealing with lots of different messages that are, you know, dealing with different things. So please do spell things out if you can. As a friend of mine always says, you need to spell things out for Peter. Dave in South Gloucester says, where in this country is there order and control? Also, those 4 things you say we should protect criminals with, there are law-abiding citizens that don't have those. He's talking about shelter, medical attention, food and water. There is a crying need for fairness, but also discipline, strength and courage in all areas, and especially in our institutions, says Dave in South Gloucester. I want to talk about some more people who are in prison. These are the Rotherham monsters, the grooming gang, rape gang, let's just call it what it is, who preyed on teenage girls. Combined, they got £611,000 in legal aid. This is 7 men who were jailed for a combined 101 years in 2018 for grooming and abusing 5 girls in South Yorkshire between 1998 and 2005. The ringleader, Mohammed Imran Ali Akhtar, who's 43, was sentenced to 23 years in jail. His case got £143,696 in legal aid. His total does not include costs for a separate trial last year in which he got a 12-year term for raping a girl of 13 after plying a 13-year-old girl with booze and drugs. 5 other defendants aged between 40 and 45 were jailed between 10 and 20 years. Each received between £60,000 and £99,000 in legal aid. A 7th got £90,849. All bar one of the gang were convicted of rape, with one of them falling asleep in court as an impact statement of one of his victims was read out. This is the impact statement. The victims make that statement. They say how it has had an effect on their lives. Can you imagine what would be in some of those impact statements? I've people I know who work in courts. I know some barristers, I know some solicitors telling me about those impact statements. They say they are the hardest part of the job because they tell you exactly what the crime his impact has been. That is what they are there for. And as one of those was read out of a child who was raped, well, the defendant, who got tens of thousands of pounds of your money in legal aid, he fell asleep. Rakib Hassan is a social policy analyst. Rakib, great to have you on the programme. I'm slightly torn on this, just like 10% torn on this one, because I want the legal system to work. I want there to be fairness, but I'm also a taxpayer, as are basically everybody else who's watching and listening to this programme. And £611,000 of legal aid, you know, appeal after appeal. Where does this end? What's your view on this, Rakib?
Well, Peter, I think we have to make the point that ensuring a fair trial is a fundamental aspect of our criminal justice system. And I think even though we're talking about the most heinous of activities, most heinous of crimes, that is a core, that's very much at the core of our criminal justice system. I think where the issue is, you look at this amount of taxpayers' money being used in the form of legal aid for this grooming gang in Rotherham, over £600,000. And I think people look at that and then they'll see, we've only allocated £5 million for this investigation. I think calling investigation would be very flattering into grooming gangs, which is very much a nationwide scandal, a nationwide problem, which some people have said incorporates in the region of 50 towns and cities. Yeah. So we could talk about legal aid. We could talk about it is important to ensure a fair trial, because that goes to the heart of the integrity of our criminal justice system. But then you look at this amount being spent in the form of legal aid for those who are involved in grooming gang activity, and then the paltry sum of £5 million to investigate this nationwide problem, which won't even scratch the surface when it comes to determining public sector accountability. People will think that in itself is a grave injustice.
And I think this is the major issue this week, and a number of our viewers and listeners saying, you've recalled Parliament for Scunthorpe. What about recalling Parliament to deal with this issue? Because the changes in how that £5 million, which, as you know and I know, Rakib, in government circles, I mean, £5 million, you know, if I got it, that would be brilliant. I'd love to have £5 million. But the point is, in terms of government spending, that is a tiny, tiny amount of money. Why do you think the Labour Party isn't taking this seriously enough?
Well, I think there's a variety of factors at play. This is very much a nationwide problem, or what could be formally called group localised child sexual exploitation. But if you look at the areas where it has taken place, disproportionately, traditionally Labour-controlled areas. If you look at Rotherham, for example, the local authority there, Labour's been in control there since it was created, I think, back in 1974. So I think that the issue is that I believe that the Labour government is very reluctant to commit to a statutory inquiry, which has those powers which can compel witnesses and take evidence under oath, and ultimately determine public sector accountability, because it would make the Labour Party look like it was not just irresponsible, but we're talking about gross negligence here in terms of managing and approaching the matter of grooming gangs in the UK.
I wonder if I can ask you about a related story, and this is about Hashem Abedi, the Manchester Arena terrorist who threw hot cooking oil and then started stabbing prison officers with makeshift weapons. Rakib, I've just been asking the question all morning how on earth this was allowed to happen. And HMP Frankland is where the worst of the worst are kept. It's essentially our Alcatraz in terms of Islamic terrorists, and there will be many, many questions raised, and I wonder how much accountability there will actually be. What's your take on this?
Well, I think that this horrific incident took place in Her Majesty's Prison in Frankland in County Durham. That's already a Category A men's prison, and Hashem Abedi, to my understanding, is being held at a separation centre, which is ultimately designed for the most dangerous and influential extremist prisoners. And I think that this is a serious security failure in itself. And 3 prison officers, I believe they sustained life-threatening injuries.
That's right.
Severe burns due to hot cooking oil and stab wounds as well, with homemade weapons being used. So I think there needs to be a serious re-evaluation of security. And I'll make this point as well, that prison officers, many are grossly underpaid and overstretched as well. And I think that in itself is a serious problem in terms of maintaining security in the prison estate, but especially when it comes to the most dangerous inmates.
Rakib, thank you. That's Dr. Rakib Hassan, social policy analyst. Appreciate you joining me on the programme this morning. John Roberts has been in touch from Germany, presumably not the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in America. John says, what's the bet that the inquiry into the prison stabbings cost more than the equipping staff with stab vests? Britain is sinking under a flood of mediocre MPs and weak leadership. We need a clear out. Mick says, regarding the legal aid issue, £600,000 for grooming gang rapists. Really, what really riles me is how on earth can a lawyer stand up and defend these people knowing what they've done? Great show pick, Pete. Well, Mick, often they work on a sort of cab rank system. Often they're just told, look, you're the next guy, you defend these people. I do believe people are entitled to defence in this country. That is different, of course, from barristers and solicitors who decide to take on cases, who don't have to, and decide to take on cases themselves, like the one I interviewed this week. Right, I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I keep saying I'm not going to talk about it anymore, and then I do. Anyway, it's been a big part of my week, let me tell you. Anyway, Joanna in Salisbury has been in touch and says Easter and Christmas have parts that date back to Babylonian times and the pagan religion. A lot of things have merged over the centuries, mixing them with the Muslim religions, going backwards and not Western culture, says Joanna. Leslie says, after listening to the MP Katie Lamb reading out the harrowing crimes committed against a young girl by gangs, how on earth can Labour deny a public inquiry? I think a lot of people asking the same question. Jane says perhaps the Prime Minister could recall Parliament on Monday to pass emergency legislation to secure the UK's borders. We need to stop undocumented males entering this country on a daily basis. Peter in Croydon in South London says, morning Peter, Yvette Cooper has 90 days to consider the case that the barrister is putting forward. She should throw it out now, otherwise she will again prove that she's totally hopeless. Penny in Essex says, having worked in the prison service, dangerous criminals should never be put in a kitchen environment where there are knives and the opportunity of using boiling fat or oil. Some negligence there, especially from someone so dangerous, serving 55 years, who had nothing to lose. Ian says, British Steel. It's also the title of a great album by Johnny's fellow Brummies, Johnny Gould's favourite fellow Brummies, Judas Priest, says Ian. And Matt says, this is going to sound harsh, but we need to focus on our country and make us great again. Cut all the handouts to other nations where we won't benefit. Use our own resources to grow our economy and don't punish our industries. For example, our farmers, and helping farmers abroad. Thank you, says Matt. Well, thank you, Matt. We'll have more calls, texts, tweets, voice notes, however you want to communicate with me, telepathic messages, smoke signals. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
People don't intervene, that staff and colleagues don't sort of charge in there. Even if they manage to sort of catch someone, there's a question of what happens if the police take hours to arrive. How are you meant to, hold someone there? So it's a really difficult situation. And alongside this rise in theft is a rise in violence and abuse against shop workers, which is really concerning. Over 2,000 incidents every single day against shop staff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Rob has been in touch and he says, British Steel, Scunthorpe, how much debt does it have? What is its revenue stream? What are its costs? Will tariffs and other suppliers be increased to make it truly competitive? What is the size of its potential market? Can it ever make a profit, and when? And should we just keep it going, irrespective of all the reasons why we shouldn't? Rob, really, really interesting points, intelligent points, thank you. Andy in Northamptonshire says, talking of testing Johnny, this is Johnny Gould. The questions keep coming in for Johnny, even though he's unfortunately left the studio, asking which football club are known as the Steel Men. That was Corby Town, which apparently had a steel plant. Amanda says, how refreshing and delightful Johnny and Stephen were earlier on today. They speak such good sense. Please make Johnny and Stephen regulars. They are regulars, let me tell you, but we'll make them perhaps even more regular. Diane who's in Durham, says earlier this week the Prime Minister was wetting his pants over the new theme park. Are we allowed to say that? We just have. My first thought was, are the roller coasters going to be built with inferior steel? Very good point. Ian Campbell says, morning Peter, or maybe he's in Campbell. I think Campbell's a place. Anyway, it just says Ian Campbell. Morning Peter, a brand new modern coal mine planned for Cumbria to provide coking coal for steel making was cancelled after many planning attempts. Tim says, I met a veteran on the street yesterday and then reviewed the recently opened prison. 100% of prisoners get better treatment than homeless veterans. We need a standard, as you decided, or equated to what was seen in the Green Mile or Shawshank prison, should be deterrent, not better than where they came from. And yeah, actually in Alcatraz as well. I visited Alcatraz in San Francisco many years ago as a teenager on a family holiday, and they said the only 4 things that were guaranteed were those things I mentioned earlier: food, water, shelter and medical attention. Let's speak to Mark in Portsmouth. Mark, are you a former prison officer, is that right?
Yes, I am, yep. I was a prison officer for just over 20 years.
So what do you make of this then?
It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's something that should never have happened. And it's quite possible for these abhorrent individuals to be put in a position where this doesn't happen, because we used to do it all the time. But
so what did you do? How did you make it safe?
Well, with prisoners like that, when I worked in high secure seg units, we would get in terrorists, other people who came with a history, were known to be extremely violent, and you would treat them accordingly. They would go in a cell. In their cell, they would have nothing apart from cardboard furniture. They would be allowed 2 books in possession, prison clothing only, and they would have that in their cell. And at meal times, you would have 3 prison officers at their door. You would tell the prisoner to stand at the back of the cell showing his hands, to put food into the cell and retrieve the cutlery stuff, which was all plastic, from the meal before. If the prisoner had to come out of his cell for showers or anything, he was escorted by 3 prison officers. He was searched before he left the cell. He would be locked in the shower unit. This is how we handle them. All of that
sounds completely sensible. It sounds completely sensible.
And
it sounds procedural. I just wonder why on earth that wasn't happening in this case, and why someone who is serving life for 22 murders in the Manchester Arena bombing was let anywhere near hot cooking oil.
The reason being is what's happened is we used to do this with certain prisoners who were that dangerous. We would use this system with them, not for days or weeks, for years, to keep everybody safe. But what happened is when I joined the prison service, you had a lot of ex-military, you had people who were streetwise, and a lot of the governor grades in the prison service then had worked their way from essentially the coalface all the way up into the management tiers and structures.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what's happened is there's a massive disparity now between the management and the governor grade in prisons and prison officers, because we have so many what I would class as liberals within the prison system now. Whereas before, if you wanted anything, if you were a prisoner, you had to earn it.
Yep.
You had to literally prove you could behave, before you even got, a pencil and a colouring book. The problem is now with prisoners is a prison officer will recommend that someone doesn't have something and may have evidence behind that. And
so it all has to be justified rather than working in the opposite direction.
Yep. And,
that's madness, Mark. That doesn't make any sense.
No, and that's what happens, and governor grades would continually overrule these things. And this is what you've got. You have a kind of a liberal management structure, and you have...
Did you stick at it for so long, Mark, or did you see it decline as you went on?
I just kind of... I think, to be perfectly honest with you, it's one of those things. It's like, I know police officers will tell you this, and paramedics and all sorts. When you've done a job like that for kind of over 7-8 years, you tend to believe that you're not capable of doing anything else.
Right.
So you stick with it no matter how bad it gets.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
How bad did it get, Mark? Were you attacked?
Sorry?
Were you attacked at any stage, Mark?
Was I what?
Attacked.
Yes, yeah, I was assaulted several times. But again, you see, when you put people in a position where they can pretty much only assault you with their hands and feet, the damage is a lot less than people who can assault you with hot oil and homemade weapons.
Did your family worry about you when you went to work?
Yes. Yeah, and I know prison officers who were medically retired through assaults, who'd been assaulted and had so bad, horrendous mental scars as well as physical scars that they couldn't physically work again.
And there'll be so many of them, I would imagine, Mark. That
yes, there are. There are lots, and they're completely unheard.
And they'll see this, and they'll see this. Well, I'd love to hear from them. 03444991000. But Mark, you will know that this story today will re-traumatise a lot of those officers.
Yes, it will. And the problem is, this moment in time in the civil service and in the prison service is you will have staff going into Frankland over the next few days who will be utterly traumatised trying to open that first cell door of the day.
Yeah.
But they'll do it because a governor grade will tell them to do it, and if they don't, they'll end up going through the whole disciplinary process, etc., etc. You know, people worry about losing their jobs.
Of course, of course.
And the problem is that is kind of, you know, how it's run. It's the prison service is shockingly low on staff, low on morale, and it's shockingly run. Okay. We need to forget about the human rights and start concentrating on looking after people.
Mark, thank you for speaking so clearly, so succinctly, so articulately, telling us just how it is on the front line. I really appreciate that. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on. We'll also talk about Easter. Stay with us here on Talk.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because in the 70s I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every spring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
English Heritage claims Easter is not originally Christian. We're also talking, excuse me, sorry, I'm just going to have a glass of water. I've just got a frog in my throat. What we're going to do while I do that is play Kelvin, who's going to talk about British steel being the best. This is what Kelvin says.
Morning, Peter. On the subject of British steel, we should have our own steel made here. We used to have it years ago. We had Shelton Bar here in Stoke-on-Trent, and you know there's loads of other places as well that made it in the UK. Back in the 80s, I used to work for an exhaust company, and the tube that we had was pretty good, I'd say, compared to today. Now, a few years ago, I ended up working for another exhaust company doing the same jobs that I did back in the 80s, and this cheap Chinese tube was nothing but rubbish. It either collapsed, it split, or it just broken off when you were trying to bend it. It was absolutely terrible. And if that's the steel we're going to have, you know, I think we're going to have a lot of problems. So we need to have our own, and we do make good steel in this country. You know, it's time to bring it back, and not only just for the steel, but for jobs as well. And this wokery about saving the planet needs to stop, because, you know, the Earth has spun off its axis, but nobody's telling you about that. You know, it's that's causing the problems with climate, not CO2 and all that lot. Anyway, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Kelvin, and thank you for rescuing me. I was having a little bit of a problem with something went down the wrong way that I was having. I shouldn't have eaten it, but I had it during the break. So there we are. Thank you very much indeed for Kelvin for his thoughts on British steel. And on this hour, between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk, we are going to talk about Easter and English Heritage claiming Easter is not originally Christian. Also, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, says Hamas lawyers will be struck off, or should be struck off. These are the barristers, one of whom I interviewed this week, who are representing Hamas, saying they should be not a prescribed organisation. That's what Robert Jenrick has said. We'll get reaction from Nicole Lambert, who is a journalist who covers all these issues. But first of all, I want to tell you that between now and 1, I want to get as many calls on the air as possible from you, and let me know your thoughts. So 0344 499 1000, you can use that to give me a ring, or drop me a voice note the same way Kelvin did. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can, as I say, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Right then, let's talk about Easter, because English Heritage has put out some information, and English Heritage has claimed that Easter was not originally Christian. The charity is accused of whitewashing the holiday by claiming its roots lie in a pagan festival celebrating the start of spring. This is a booklet about Easter's origins given out at several of its historic sites. It says the word comes from the name of the goddess Eostre, while failing to mention Christianity at all. The booklet is part of a children's Easter adventure quest in which children are invited to track down the Easter eggs and get rewarded with a tasty chocolate treat. Well, I am very much in favour of that, except when it gives you a cough when you're live on air. But nonetheless, surely Easter, which is a Christian festival, and Christianity is the dominant religion in the UK, should be properly, children should be properly informed about that, and that it should be something that they celebrate properly. Under the headline, The Origins of Easter, it states, did you know Easter started as a celebration of spring? Long ago, people welcomed warmer days and new life by honouring the goddess Eostre, who gave Easter its name. Fun fact, some traditions for Eostre, including dancing around bonfires and decorating homes with flowers. Well, let's talk to Philip Kistley about this. He's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. There are just two words I'd like them to have included in that, Philip. Jesus Christ.
It would seem as though they would be the appropriate words for that kind of educational material, wouldn't it? It's really interesting because we've had conversations quite recently, Peter, haven't we, about other attacks on Easter? I think just one last week. So it seems that Easter is getting a real kicking at the moment. I'm worried about what's going to happen come Christmas. There seems to be something happening where we seem to be, and it's coming from organisations like English Heritage, but it's also coming from people like the Mayor of London, and it's also coming from the police. We seem to be delegitimising or removing Christianity and Easter in particular from the public space, and I'm extremely concerned about it because, as I've said before, if you're removing this part of children's identity, this part of the story of England, this part of our culture, then you are by definition making that culture unstable. And for children not to learn about the fundamentals of Easter, i.e. to take Christianity out of Easter, is an egregious thing to do, and we should be pushing back on it with all the power that we know that we have.
Why do you think they're doing it?
Well, I think there are lots of different kinds of reasons. I suppose, you could say, oh, well, we have to be critical and we have to put everything under the microscope, certainly in terms of culture. And I would certainly go along with that. I think we do. And we have to be critical of religion. But the point is, we have to be critical of all religions and not just Christianity. There seems to be a kind of zero-sum game here happening. I don't know about you, but I've been watching quite closely the Eid, and I've also been watching quite closely Lent. Now, I've all the time. I haven't seen any evidence of Lent in the public sphere at all. So
maybe they've given it up for Lent.
Yeah, they've given Lent up for Lent, and I think that's absolutely true. It seems you can have one or the other. It seems like all kinds of identity politics, and this is based in identity politics, I think. It's a zero-sum game, and I'm very worried about it. So I think it's that faux criticality. I think it's fear of Islam as well, and I think Islam is becoming our official religion. We're seeing that everything is about celebrating Eid. Everything is about celebrating Islam. There is no criticality as far as Islam.
And certainly, I know very, very few Christians who don't feel there isn't criticality over Christianity. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be, but as you correctly say, where is the criticality of other religions, and where is the same rules should apply to all? And I just wonder as well, when it comes to things like free speech, when it comes to things like comedy, for example, there are lots of people who are really, really critical within comedy, as they have every right to be so, not something I really choose to or enjoy listening to or watching, but there are lots of comedians who are really critical of Christianity. Ricky Gervais, for example, who's a very outspoken comedian who I actually happen to find very funny, is someone who is very, very critical of Christianity. He's an atheist, and he would say himself that he is a very strong atheist and thinks that Christianity is a load of rubbish. But I do wonder how whether there are many comedians, now Ricky Gervais does it and can get away with it in a way that others can't, but if you're starting out in comedy, are you really going to go for Islam? Are you really going to go for to criticise that religion, for example? And I just wonder, are we applying the same standards to all religions here? And I just don't see evidence of that, Philip.
No, I think it's very easy to present yourself as being edgy, taking on Christianity and almost being blasphemous in lots of ways. But of course, it's the opposite of edgy. You're not being edgy. It's the safest thing you could possibly do, isn't it? It was probably edgy in 1978 when Monty Python did it, and it was probably edgy in the 60s when people were thinking really critically about reimagining Christianity, but I don't think it is now. And there's an element of cowardice and fear here, and it has to be said that that fear is of Islam, because there are repercussions if you push against Islam or if you criticize it in any way, shape or form. The last thing you're going to do if you're an entertainer and you're a comedian is put yourself in that kind of way.
I'm just going to read out what English Heritage have told the Sunday Telegraph. They say, we care for over 400 sites, and across them all, from our panels on sites to guidebooks, audio tours on our website, we cover a broad and deep range of themes connected to the stories of our sites, not least at Whitby Abbey in North Yorkshire, where in the year 664 an important agreement was reached about how to calculate the date of Easter. Our Easter Adventure Quest is a trail for children which references a range of fun facts about seasonal traditions, cultures and religions, including Christianity. What do you make of that statement, Philip?
Well, it seems like sophistry to me. It seems like blurring, and it seems like, well, we do this and we do that and we do this and we do that, and if you don't think about it too much, then we'll get away with it. No, I think if you're dealing with Christianity, then you need to put Christianity first. If you were dealing with Islam or any other religion, I'm not just singling that particular religion out, but if you're dealing with any other religion, then you're going to put the tenets of that religion first. That's what the celebration is all about. But what we're seeing is this kind of delegitimization, as I say, this removal of Christianity. And I think it does something, it damages us in a way that is, even if you're not religious, I'm not particularly religious, I have to say, but I think it damages us as a society and as a culture if you're removing something, the basis on which much of our culture is built.
Philip, thank you. That's Philip Kisley there as a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Always good to talk to you. Philip, a lot of sense, always spoken by Philip, and indeed by our viewers and listeners as well, including Christina, who says, great show. I agree with Stephen Wolfe, who spoke earlier. Prisoners should have to earn their bed, their blankets, etc. I would also like to see an American-style change use. Inherent beards should be shaved off. We have been way too soft on these dangerous prisoners. The ECHR needs to go. Simon in Portsmouth says the Hamas barristers are not taking any payment, which in my world signifies ideological alignment, which should be outlawed. Amanda says the aggressive, out-of-control lawyer you had on your show on Thursday should be severely reprimanded, if not struck off. His behaviour was completely outrageous. We're going to be talking about that in a minute or two. Paula in Salford says, for those of us living in Manchester, the news about the attack on prison officers by Abedi is particularly sickening. This is Hasham Abedi, who threw hot cooking oil and started stabbing 3 officers. One's been released from hospital, as we know. 2 others are there with very severe injuries. Paula continues, my daughter's school field backed onto the bomber's back garden. Many of her friends were at the concert. Luckily, they all got home safely. Abedi's cousin also had a barber shop on the main road in Manchester. Sound familiar? Capital punishment does not work in a democracy. Look at America. But the savage needs solitary confinement with no privileges. He behaved in a medieval way, so he should not be forced to live like that. Chris says, good morning, Peter. Great guest this morning. Can we place bets on how many times the Navy will have to pick up illegals in boats while protecting steel? The irony is that the Royal Navy will be sitting there watching the dinghies floating past them, invading the country, and the Navy will do absolutely nothing. Maybe someone needs to hand them a job description form. Have a nice Sunday, says Chris. Thank you very much indeed to Chris, and thank you for your message. And 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send me a text message on 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can send me a voice note on the main number as well, 0344 499 1000. Judith has been in touch on the death penalty. This is what she has to say.
Morning, Peter. Judith from Radlett here. So what I would do with the other demons and the barbarians, I'd drop them all on an uninhabited island. I think there's a few in the Outer Hebrides. Forgive me, my geography is not that great. And I would just drop food parcels in maybe once every, 2 or 3 weeks. And that's that. That's what these people deserve. And I'm all for the death penalty with people like that. There is no rehabilitation. They're wired differently from us. Their mindset is differently. There's nothing we can do. Sorry, I'd be quite happy to pull the trigger, by the way. Okay, thanks, Peter.
Judith, thanks for that. I respectfully disagree with you, but on my programme we disagree without being disagreeable, and Judith has very respectfully put her strong points forward. I've put mine forward too, and you can make up your own mind. But feel free to tell me I'm wrong. 0344 499 1000. We'll have a debate like civilised people. Michael has been in touch about the problems in prisons with a voice note.
Hi, Pete. There's more than one problem with the prison service. Firstly, the staff are extremely young and undertrained because the experienced officers have all stepped away and retired. They're not being replaced. So the prison staff you have now are young. Some of them are like you've just come out of school. As regards to the oil attack, you can buy oil on your weekly catering form where you buy your treats and toiletries and so on and so forth. You can buy oil on that. That goes into the kettle in your cell, and then it's heated up. Maybe they will stop that now, but it doesn't get away from the fact that the staff are undertrained, no experience, and, well, it's a recipe for disaster.
Michael, thanks for your opinion there. Really appreciate it. It's some sensible thoughts there. Just to say, I could hear myself gabbling away in the background there, so if you could just turn your telly or your radio down just when you're recording your voice note, that would be brilliant, just so it's nice and clear for people to hear. We do have some viewers and listeners who don't have brilliant hearing, and sometimes when there's music or there's distractions and so on, it can make it harder to hear. But thank you, Michael, nonetheless, for your thoughts there. Hilton in St Albans, maybe it's the hotel is texting us, I don't know. Hilton says, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, Easter is the principal festival of the Christian Church, which celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ on the third day after his crucifixion. The earliest recorded observance of an Easter celebration comes from the 2nd century, though the commemoration of Jesus' resurrection probably occurred earlier. Very interesting. Thank you for that, Hilton. Thank you to Encyclopedia Britannica. Simon in Devon says, it's quite remarkable that if Jesus was to come back and save us all, he would be undoubtedly arrested for preaching on the streets of our once Great Britain. This is where we are, says Simon. I did actually once ask the pastor in my local church, a guy called David, what do you think would happen if there was a sort of, unkempt guy with long hair, hadn't washed in a while, turned up in a dress or wearing a long tunic anyway, with 12 of his mates, who said, by the way, I'm the Son of God. How do you think people would treat him? And the pastor said, without skipping a beat, he said, exactly as the Pharisees did, which I thought was a brilliant answer. We're going to talk more. We're going to get your opinions on the air. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
People don't intervene, that staff and colleagues don't sort of charge in there. Even if they manage to sort of catch someone, there's a question of what happens if the police take hours to arrive. How are you meant to, hold someone there? So it's a really difficult situation. And alongside this rise in theft is a rise in violence and abuse against shop workers, which is really concerning. Over 2,000 incidents every single day against shop staff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
In Sumy in northern Ukraine, the emergency services there, just to bring you up to date, they're reporting 31 people have been killed, including 2 children in the region. Another 84 people have been killed, including 10 children. There are just an awful lot of statistics there and details in terms of what's happening. Clearly a horrendous attack by the Russians. So the total, I think, is 84 in total, including 10 children. So there's we'll bring you the latest between now and 1 o'clock once we hear it. Simon has been in touch. From Nottingham, he says, I would like to correct you on what you said about Ricky Gervais. He doesn't criticise Christianity. He criticises every religion, so please correct what you said. Yeah, he does criticise every religion, that's fine, but I mean, Christianity is a religion, so he's criticising that as well. He may not do it specifically, Simon, but certainly you're right, and he is sceptical about all religions, as you correctly say. Pam says, regarding Scunthorpe, there is very little mention of the cost to the country of what benefits the benefits bill will be both financially and mentally. Net zero must be postponed. Coking coal, oil and gas must be mined in this country to survive. Thank you to Stuart, who says, regarding cancelling Easter, why is the Christian community why are Christian community relations never considered? And in a Christian majority society, not given priority? Why is it that the church is not fighting the erosion of Christianity in Britain? I think that's a really good point. Stuart, I think a lot of people will agree with you on that. I certainly do. Neil says the same has happened to the prison service as the police service. They stopped taking ex-military people, replacing them with diversity hires, making it weaker. It's simple. Dave says, £600,000 of legal aid, that's sickening. If in the unlikely event of me needing legal aid, I bet it would be a massive no, and I would have to pay for it myself. Well, I know the bar is pretty low in terms of the amount of money you have. And some people, you know, involved in any sort of legal case, if I can give you any advice at all, never involve yourself in a legal case unless you absolutely have to and have no option whatsoever. I mean, they're just expensive. It's just lawyers, the lack, you know, losing time at work. There are all sorts of ways that being involved in a legal case can just ruin people financially in so many different ways. Some people lose their homes as a result. Maggie in London says, so the Home Secretary has been given 90 days to respond and give an answer to these barristers that are putting forward this idea that Hamas should not be prescribed as an organisation. For crying out loud, it should be an immediate no, says Maggie in London. And in fairness to the government, Maggie, I did report what the Jewish Chronicle was reporting the other day. I think it was on Friday when I reported what their journalists were saying, which they'd interviewed David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. He said, like, we're just not changing our mind on this. Hamas is not going to be a prescribed organisation. It's going to stay with that level of designation. Esme has been in touch and says, great show as always, Peter, loving the comments with the ex-prison officer. He talks so much sense. He's hit the nail on the head. I am just a member of the public, but I can see exactly what's going on. Why, oh why, can all these woolly liberals not just see common sense? Also, the death penalty should be put to a public referendum. I think we all know the way it would go. That's why I don't think it ever will be put to a referendum, unfortunately, but for extreme cases where there is without a question of doubt, no question of guilt, I think that that should be the only result, and I don't go with the opinion of it being a situation where that they've already created by going to prison anyway, because I refuse to want to pay for them, says Esme. And Esme, I think a lot of people will agree with you. They've done lots of polling on the death penalty. It's interesting, for a long time the public was in favour of the death penalty. There's been a trend recently that the public is not in favour of the death penalty. I would imagine our viewers and listeners are in favour of it overall, but listen, I just don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's conducive to the public good. I don't think it is something that should happen. If you disagree with me, if you think I'm wrong, that's okay. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Let's have a voice note from JB on British Steel.
We need to nationalise British Steel to secure it. We're in very uncertain times, and at the same time they should be reopening some of the coal mines because we need our own security. We cannot rely on ships coming across the water if we are in a volatile situation. Second World War, the shipping lanes were disrupted, so I think we should make sure that we have got everything we need as much as we can on our own soil.
Thank you for your thoughts on that, JB. And once again, if you wouldn't mind just turning down, I mean, it's not often I ask people to turn me down or turn me off. Let me tell you, when I'm broadcasting on Talk, I want you to watch and listen for as long as you can, not just to me, but to my colleagues as well. But it would be great if you just turn it down just briefly while you record your message, just so everybody, including people who have hearing difficulties, can just make it nice and clear and everybody can be heard properly. I do think with nationalising steel, it's a huge issue, it's an important issue, it's a difficult issue. I think, you know, these problems were there before, they've been there for a very long time. I'm not sure Parliament needed to be recalled on a Saturday. I think that probably could have been avoided. Did the legislation need to go through just as quickly as that? Could the government have just acted anyway? I don't think they were going to be subject to any sort of legal problems, although there might have been. Maybe that was the advice. Maybe the Chinese company would have sued them. It's a really, really interesting one. I'm very interested in your thoughts on it. Keir Starmer, when he was in Parliament yesterday, as soon as that legislation, that debate actually was ongoing, and he went up to Scunthorpe to talk to the workers, he put this out on his Twitter, just a short video of Keir Starmer talking to workers. Let's hear from the Prime Minister.
I judged yesterday that it was right that we acted immediately to take control.
These are our last blast furnaces, and without them the UK will not have the ability to produce primary steel. It's vital for national security, it's vital for the national interest, and it's vital for our community.
After months of uncertainty for the workers, it's just nice to know that they've got a bit of stability back.
The atmosphere at work completely changed. Having the Prime Minister coming up so really is reinforcing that the government are on our side.
We've got a future for the steelworks in Scunthorpe and making steel for the country.
Well, that was Keir Starmer talking to some steelworkers there in Scunthorpe. And Jonathan Reynolds is the business secretary. We heard a lot from him yesterday, certainly. He has been speaking to workers as well. He's also been speaking in Parliament and indeed speaking to Sky News this morning. This is what the business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, has been telling them this morning.
It is perhaps at this stage the likely option. But what we need for any steel site...
Is that because you don't think you can get a commercial private sector partner?
I believe there is a potential for that, and that is my preference, but I feel we've got to find a bridge to that. The kind of investments required for the transition to new steel technology, whichever technology that is, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of capital. Now, you need the government standing behind that. This government has done that with our steel fund. We put dedicated resources in, a big change from the last government in that regard.
Jonathan Reynolds there, the business secretary, talking about the prospect, the spectre of nationalisation. What happened yesterday wasn't quite nationalising the steel industry. It came pretty flippin' close. Andrew Griffith is the shadow business secretary. He reacted to this on Sky News this morning.
It was a deal that was welcomed by the GMB union, by the community union and by UK Steel. And indeed they subsequently went on. And it was the only deal at the time. And many people, including the British steel workers, the unions on the ground, local MPs, all wanted that deal to happen. And it did indeed go on and get investment into Scunthorpe and keep the business going.
Andrew Griffith there, the business secretary, the shadow business secretary. Of course, he's a Conservative. Now, the previous business secretary, so Jonathan Reynolds is obviously the Labour guy in the government at the moment. Before the election, when the Conservatives were in power, Kemi Badenoch, she was the trade and business secretary, and she was attempting to do a deal. That's what Andrew Griffith was referring to there. She attempted to do a deal with the Chinese owners of Scunthorpe. Lots of people have opinions on this. Maybe you're one of them. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We are going to talk in a second about what another Conservative has said. This is Robert Jenrick, who is the Shadow Justice Secretary, and he has argued that these lawyers who are in the news this week, 3 barristers who are bringing a case, well, an action really, on an application on behalf of Hamas. They're working for Hamas. Hamas are their clients, and they're saying that they want to that Hamas should be de-prescribed, that it shouldn't be seen as a terrorist organisation anymore. That's the guy, one of them, I had a pretty pretty interesting experience with during an interview on Thursday. But now Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has suggested that those lawyers should be struck off by their professional organisation. I wonder what you think about that, and we'll be reflecting on that in just a minute here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on everything that's coming into the building at the moment. Barry has been in touch and says Christianity is not so much a religion as a way of living. Many misunderstand this. We follow the way it is, the way Jesus lived. Yes, we fall short, but we keep trying. When we fall short, we bring upon our faith condemnation from non-believers. Barry, listen, the best description I ever heard of Christianity is that Christians aren't perfect, they're just forgiven. That is certainly, I mean, the whole idea of, I've thought a lot about Christianity this morning actually, and the whole idea of Christian witness. There's one person in my life who doesn't like being mentioned on the radio very much, but she's at church at the moment, so she won't know. My father's mystery female companion is someone who bears Christian witness. And what she does is she tries her hardest to live her life as a Christian. She doesn't always succeed. She doesn't always not sin, because sin is part of life. She asks forgiveness. She reads her Bible every day. She goes to prayer meetings. She goes to church once, if not twice, on a Sunday. She does Bible studies. She goes on retreats, goes to Christian festivals. The Christianity and Jesus Christ is the most important person in this person's life. And that is something that I draw a lot of inspiration from, even though I'm not a believer myself. Is she perfect? No. She would admit that herself. And no Christian is. But as I say, Barry, best description ever. It was when I was at a youth club when I was a teenager, and I saw written on a wall, Christians aren't perfect, they're just forgiven, which I think is probably true of many religions, it must be said. Mark's been in touch with a voice note on why he thinks Easter is important.
Basically, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. He died for you. His blood was shed for the remission of your sin. He was buried and rose on the third day. He is the Son of God, Christ. And if you believe in him, you shall not perish, but have everlasting life. That is why Easter is so important in the Christian calendar. And the fact that anybody, any organisation in this country would even consider banning it within a Christian country is absolutely disgusting. I will have a lot more to say on this, and a message of hope for fellow Christians probably some point next week. Anyway, cheers and great show as ever, Peter.
Mark, thanks for that. A profession of faith, if ever there was one. Well, this weekend is also very important for Jews because it is Passover, and Nicole Lambert is with me. She is Jewish, she is a journalist, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Robert Jenrick has been saying about these lawyers for Hamas. Nicole, first of all, a very happy Passover to you and to your family.
Thank you, and happy Palm Sunday, or peaceful Palm Sunday for everybody that celebrates and is listening or watching. We had that interview with the lawyer later, and we will actually play the whole thing again later on in this show, because that's something that people have been asking us to do. It's certainly caused a bit of a stir, but now we have Robert Jenrick, the shadow Justice Secretary, saying that he believes there's a clear need to uphold public confidence in the legal profession and ensure rigorous enforcement of the UK sanctions regime. He has called for a thorough and transparent investigation of Riverway Law. This is the firm that, or the organisation that is putting this forward, this Lister's Regulation Authority, he says should be investigated, and the lawyers trying to remove Hamas from the UK's list of prescribed terrorist groups should be investigated and potentially struck off. In anticipation of Mr. Jenrick's letter, Fahad Ansari, he's the director of Riverway, said, "We were in contact with the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation, External Counsel and others who had represented sanctioned organisations to ensure that we did not breach our duties under the sanctions regime." He also accused the Shadow Justice Secretary of being a low-grade politician lacking any insight on responsible public service. I wonder what you make of this, Nicole. Well, I think there's two things. One is that, of course, lawyers should be able to represent whoever they can. And so we see lawyers representing mass murderers and all of that. And that's an important part of our justice system. The problem with some of these lawyers is that they are activist lawyers. As you know, from your discussion with Frank McGuinness, he very much believes in what he is aiming for. The depressing thing is that after October 7, when he posted a photograph of Hamas militants breaking through the border and wrote "Victory to the Intifada," he was investigated by the Bar Standards Board, and they didn't find that there was a case to answer.
So this is a depressing story about our establishment and what they recognise within our own legal system. And as to the Rivway law lawyer, then he has written on social media so much inflammatory stuff. For example, you should view Hamas as an army of angels. He also said Zionists should be hunted down and brought to justice. So, of course, Robert Jenrick is completely right that these guys should be investigated, not necessarily for the case that they've taken, in that people should be able to take cases, even ones that we view as abhorrent, but the fact that they are writing this stuff on social media, and that shows just how they are so not afraid that that actual justice and actual legal systems will be in place to stop them, even though it's to support Hamas is against the law in this country officially.
What do you think it says about the legal profession in this country that there are lawyers within it? And I'm certainly not saying for a second that most solicitors and barristers aren't perfectly upstanding people, but there are people who are, in fairness to Frank McGuinness, in fairness to Fahad Ansari, they're risking their careers here, aren't they?
They are risking their careers, but I think they probably wouldn't be risking their careers if they weren't activist lawyers to start with, and if they weren't so open about it on social media. And that's, for me, just one of the mad things about social media, that we now see, just taking the case of post-October 7 world, we're seeing doctors, teachers, educationalists, all supporting Hamas. And they're all doing it openly. So as before, they might have done it secretly, and that would have been a different matter. But now they're saying it publicly, and they're going against our own laws of the land. And for the solicitor there is a regulatory authority, and they look at integrity. And how can we say someone has integrity if they're supporting
terrorists?
Sorry.
Supporting terrorists, supporting a terrorist organisation.
Supporting terrorists, exactly.
Yeah. Nicole, thank you. That's Nicole Lambert there, who's a journalist who follows all these issues. Many thanks to her. Thanks to Chris as well, who's been in touch. He says, all I will say to the steel workers is this: Keir visited farmers and promised to help. Keir visited the pensioners and promised to help. Michelle says Labour aren't going to save the steel industry. There was a power grab. We've given unprecedented powers to the business secretary that's never worked in business. The law doesn't apply to him, and he is immune from any potential prosecution. That's not quite true, Michelle, but I see where you're going with that. Once a government is given power, it does not give it up easily. Labour aren't going to bury the steel industry, while people believe anything this government says is beyond me. James is in Wolverhampton and has given me a ring about selling off national assets. James, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Peter. The problem is when Maggie Thatcher back in the 80s, 90s started selling off British Gas, and then all the electric companies went as well. It's an almighty mess. Look at the water companies now, and the train companies as well. If they'd kept them, everything would have probably been in a better state, and the prices would probably be a bit lower as well. But the other thing as well, if France were, one of our main electric companies is owned by the French, the other one by the Germans. This is complete nonsense. It shouldn't be happening. If this was happening in France or Germany, there'd be an outcry.
It's national infrastructure, isn't it? It should be national.
It shouldn't be allowed. I mean, we're just selling all the sulfates. It's just.
Well, was privatisation one of the problems, do you think, James? When Margaret Thatcher and other Conservatives sold off these industries, the free market means that they'll go to the highest bidder.
No, but not when it's the highest bidder is Chinese. Complete mess. Look, the French companies, they come here, they had Peugeot, they closed Peugeot down basically, Same with Goodyear's in Wolverhampton, they used to make wonderful tyres, took them to Poland, but that's got nothing to do with it. Yeah. But the thing is, we've got to be more loyal to our country, and the workers need a bit of stability, and the only way they're going to get stability is when they know they're not changing hands every 5 minutes, Yeah. This is, how silly can you get selling an important bit of business, But to the Chinese, it doesn't make sense. Would they sell it to us? I don't think so.
It's a very fair point. James, thank you for your thoughts there, James in Wolverhampton. After the break, by popular demand, I'm going to play you the interview that happened on Thursday. I can honestly say it's been an extraordinary few days. Frank McGuinness is a barrister. He is representing Hamas. He, in an application, an action essentially to the Home Office, asking Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, to de-prescribe Hamas. I had an interview with him on Thursday. There's been huge reaction online to it. Many people missed it and want to play it again. You can, of course, get it on YouTube, but we're going to play it for you after the break. Stay with us.
But the idea that in our politics at the moment we are obsessing about a fictional drama series, I think tells you all you need to know about our political class not actually facing up to the reality of the problem. I mean, I'll give props actually to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, who said, no, I haven't watched it and I don't need to watch it to understand the problems of Britain. It's a fictional series. I don't need to watch it any more than I need to watch Casualty to understand what's going on in the National Health Service.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, on Thursday, Frank McGuinness, who is a barrister and he is someone who has decided to represent Hamas. Hamas want to be de-prescribed in this country, which means that they wouldn't be seen as a terrorist organisation. I think the evidence is very clear that they are a terrorist organisation and should be prescribed. Frank McGuinness doesn't think that. He's representing them. He spoke to me on Thursday. It was quite an encounter. I've had quite a lot of reaction to it, and a number of people wanted us to play it again. Here it is. I don't want to mischaracterise this. This case, to me anyway, and tell me if I'm wrong, is specifically saying that Hamas should not be prescribed as a terrorist organisation in the UK.
Yes, that's right. It's not a case yet, is it? It's an application, and it's for the Secretary of State to decide it one way or the other. And if she decides that she doesn't want to de-prescribe, then it becomes a case if my client, Hamas, decides to appeal that decision to the judiciary.
Have you, we hear about barristers taking cases on the taxi rank and so on, especially in criminal cases. Have you decided to take this case?
What do you mean?
Has it been your decision to take this case? You've been instructed and you've decided to take the case?
Who else would have decided to take the case? I don't understand. So of course I decide what cases I take.
How do you sleep at night?
That's a baffling question because, I mean, do you want me to answer that question? I will if you want.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas are terrorists, aren't they? It's so unbelievably clear.
All right, so I'm going to answer your question. You shouldn't have asked it, but I will answer your question.
I shouldn't have asked it. We have this thing called free speech in this country, so I can ask whatever I like. Perhaps you can answer it.
I will answer the question. It's just you're talking over me. Did you want to hear my answer?
Yeah.
All right. I need you to listen to my answer very carefully because what you've done is extremely dangerous and you shouldn't have asked that question, all right? So please do listen to my response, and when I'm done, I'll say next question, all right? You have just asked me, how do I sleep at night? And what you're trying to do by saying that is you're trying to fix me, you're trying to associate me with my client. There is a very
You're
well-established
representing them, Frank. You're
so
representing them. You've decided to this is a conversation. I'm not going to be told whether I can talk or not talk. You've decided to represent them.
So you've invited me to talk over me because you're afraid of what I have to say, is that right?
I'm not afraid of what you have to say, but you're saying that I'm associating you with them.
You seem afraid. You seem afraid.
Afraid? We're having a conversation, and I'm asking you...
Well, at the bar, we tend to let each other speak. Is that not the convention?
I'm not a barrister, I'm an interviewer, and you're saying that I'm associating you with your client. You have told me that you have decided to represent Hamas. They are an unspeakably horrific and dreadful organisation.
Oh,
so
you're
yes,
doing it again?
Yes, I am associating you with them. Because you've decided to represent them.
Okay, I think you might be hearing from the police. I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like you might, because the point is that, you know, the low point of this, on this side of the Irish Sea, was Boris Johnson and Priti Patel using the phrase activist lawyers. They knew what they were doing. They were using it to stoke anti-migrant racism. And then a man showed up with a knife at the law firm, calling by name for a solicitor who I know, because they put a target on his back. And the low point on the Irish side of the Irish Sea is Pat Finucane, of course, right? A British MP stood up in Parliament and said he's just like his clients. Pat Finucane represented members of the Provisional IRA, which is another proscribed organisation. And 3 weeks later, Pat Finucane was, of course, murdered in front of his family by loyalist paramilitaries who we now know had handlers in the British establishment. So you're playing the same game. Don't talk over me.
Let's talk about Hamas. I'll talk over if you want to.
No,
excuse me.
You're playing the same game. You put
I'm not playing any games. I'm not playing any games.
You just put a target on my back.
I'm not putting a target on anybody's back. I am asking you. No, I don't.
You owe me an apology.
No, I don't. I'm asking you why you've decided. Why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Next question.
Why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Did you not hear me say next question? I'm not answering your question.
You're not answering the question about why you've decided to represent Hamas.
You're trying to make this a story about me. Talk about the application.
You have decided to represent Hamas. I think people are interested as to why you've decided to do that, because they're
You're trying to make me the story.
They're a terrorist organisation.
You're deliberately putting a target on my back.
I'm absolutely not doing that. I'm asking you
if there are negative consequences, I'm holding you personally responsible.
I'm asking you a perfectly relevant and reasonable question, which is why have you decided to represent Hamas when you did not have to do that?
Let's talk about how there's a crisis of Zionism because it's committing a genocide. Do you agree that Israel's committing a genocide?
No.
So if I'm right that it is, and if South Africa's government is right that it is, that would make you a genocide denier, would it? Is that what you are? You deny genocide, do you?
We've gone very, very quickly from me asking you a perfectly reasonable question, which you're refusing to answer, to you alleging that I'm a genocide denier, which I would argue is defamatory.
You literally denied the genocide. It's not defamatory.
I'm not denying it. I'm not denying it. It is not a genocide.
Yeah, so if I said if I'm right,
it is factually not. Well, you're tying yourself up in knots. I would ask the question again: why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Well, there's lots of ways to answer that question. The obvious answer is to say that we're witnessing a terminal crisis of Zionism and that Israel's apartheid state is collapsing in front of our eyes. And that raises difficult questions for the Secretary of State about what will happen if and when Israel goes the way of South Africa. South African apartheid, of course, collapsed in 1994. And as the Irish example, right, the Provisional IRA was, of course, an illegal organisation, and yet its political wing started winning elections. In the South African example, the British government, of course, called for Mandela to be executed. That's what they wanted, and he's now regarded as a hero, right? So he was maligned as a terrorist. And whatever people think of Hamas, and of course, a lot of people will oppose what Hamas stand for and what they've done. The point about this application is to say you don't have to support a prescribed organisation to think that it shouldn't be prescribed. If people want to read the arguments that the application is based on, they can go to the website.
Perhaps you could tell us why you don't think Hamas should be a prescribed organisation.
The documents have been uploaded to, so hamascase.com has all of the pleadings if people are interested to read those
perhaps you could summarise them for us now and tell us your belief why you don't think Hamas should be a prescribed organisation.
Well, it's not about my belief. I'm a lawyer instructed to make some legal arguments, which is what I've done along with my colleagues. And it's not possible to understand the application without understanding the broader context. It's, as I've said, we're witnessing the collapse of an apartheid regime, and that means that extraordinary things will happen in those extraordinary circumstances, and that's why my client has taken this extraordinary step to approach the British Home Secretary and to say, look, there are a number of reasons why the Terrorism Act should no longer be applied to this organisation.
I think there are a number of people who will find it absolutely extraordinary that there is anyone who believes and anyone who would represent an organisation who is putting forward the argument legally that Hamas isn't a terrorist organisation and shouldn't be prescribed.
That's interesting. So you're saying that you think Hamas shouldn't be entitled to legal representation?
I'm saying that they're a terrorist organisation who have done absolutely horrendous things, and I don't want them anywhere near my country. I'm happy that they're prescribed. I'm happy that there's documented evidence of what they have done. And also, if you don't want to be a prescribed organisation, why not, I would say to Hamas, release the 59 hostages who are currently in Gaza?
So you're saying that people who take hostages should be prescribed organisations?
I'm saying that Hamas should be a prescribed organisation because it is taking hostages. I haven't mentioned anybody else or any other, or Israel or any other aspect of this. I'm talking about Hamas itself. I'm not talking about whataboutery. I'm talking about Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation that I think should be prescribed.
Well, look, okay, that's interesting. The point is that the definition of terrorism in the Terrorism Act 2000 is very broad, and basically almost any organisation that's using violence to commit a political purpose to advance a political purpose is caught by that definition, right? So the Ukrainian forces in their war against Russia, they would be caught by the definition. Israel, of course, would be caught by the definition. So what that means legally.
You've also said that the British Armed Forces would be covered by the definition. So it is the contention of your action that the British Armed Forces should be deemed a terrorist organisation. Is that correct?
No, you've misunderstood.
Well,
what I'm
explain
saying.
It to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to. So this is my point, right? The definition of terrorism in the Act is extremely broad, and most organisations, like the ones you just mentioned, the ones I was mentioning, are caught by it. And what that means is the Secretary of State has an extremely broad discretion to decide who she wants to add to that list. Of course, this organisation, the political wing of Hamas, was added to the list of prescribed organisations in 2021. The military wing was added more than 2 decades ago. And so because that discretion is so broad, what we're saying is that there are ways to legally challenge the exercise of the discretion in this case. And all we've done is to set out some entirely sensible, thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments about why the time has come for the Secretary of State to revisit the decision of her predecessor, Priti Patel, who was, of course, politically compromised and highly criticised for her dealings with the apartheid state of Israel, and to consider, of course, the position in international law, which confirms that people like Palestinians who are under occupation, I mean, this is a settled position in international law that people under occupation have a right to use armed force to resist. So Palestinians have a right to pick.
Am I getting it clear, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you believe that Hamas have a right to use armed force to represent their position?
You keep asking me what I believe, which again is it's not quite as blatant and disgusting as your previous question. But
what's interesting
it's not about what I believe.
Hamas said, well, I mean, you're representing these people and you've chosen to do so. So presumably it has something to do with what you believe.
Do you not understand how the legal system works?
Yes, I do, and I understand that you didn't have to take the case. If I were a lawyer and if someone came to me, I would say there's not in a million years would I represent Hamas. They are a disgusting, horrendous, anti-Semitic, dreadful terrorist organisation. That's what I would say. You didn't say that, and I'm very interested as to why.
Because you're trying to make the story about me instead of this important application because you're not a serious journalist, is that right?
The hour of judgment shall not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. So what the Jews hide behind trees and stones, and each tree and stone will say, O Muslim, O servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him, except for a specific tree, which is the tree of Jews. There is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. That is what Hamas believe, and I would not represent an organisation that believed that, and you have chosen to.
Where's that quote from?
The first one is from the Hamas Charter Article 7, and the second one is from Hamas Charter Article 13.
Which year was that charter passed in?
I don't have it in front of me.
You don't know, do you? You're out of your depth, aren't you?
Out of my depth, right. Well, I'll tell you what Ismail Haniyeh said.
You're quoting a document from 1988, right? And it's clear that that document has been widely criticised.
So Hamas doesn't want to kill Jews then? Hamas doesn't want to destroy the state of Israel? Is that what you're saying?
Let me just respond. So that document you're referring to is the 1988 Charter. I know you don't know what you're talking about, which is fine. You're allowed to be a bit out of your depth. There's 600 pages of supporting evidence in this application, and you've not had a chance to read it. I, of course, have worked on it extensively. So it's fair enough that there's an asymmetry here. Like, I'm not trying to trick you. It's just you're quoting a document that's more than 30 years out of date.
Well, let me tell you what was said in 2023 by Ismail Haniyeh. Let me tell you what the Hamas senior leader, Ismail Haniyeh, said on the loss of civilian life in Gaza.
Perhaps you're deliberately misleading your viewers. Have you read?
I don't think any of my viewers are under any misapprehension about what Hamas stands for. I don't think you're under any misapprehension.
You just misled them. You didn't tell them about the 2017 Charter. Why didn't you? Because you don't know what you're talking about.
On the 26th of October,
it's okay to admit that you're ignorant. That's fine.
On the 26th of October, the Hamas senior leader Ismail Haniyeh, commenting on the loss of civilian life in Gaza, said the blood of the women, children and elderly, we are the ones who need this blood, so it awakens within us the revolutionary spirit. We also have Ghazi Hamid on the 24th of October 2023 saying that he would repeat the 7th of October attacks time and again until Israel is annihilated. I don't see a huge difference between that and what was said in 1988, I must say.
What became of Ismail Haniyeh?
Well, we know what became of him because Israel assassinated him.
All right. All of these things are addressed extensively in the application. It's of course correct that Hamas should have to answer to things that they say and do, and they do extensively in the application. I encourage people to read it. It will cast light on the subject in a way that you're not even pretending to do. You're not trying to have a dialogue with me about what's actually happening. You're talking across me and trying to
How would you characterise what Hamas is doing, if not terrorism? How would you characterise it?
Well, the whole point that's being made in the argument, in the application, is that the definition of terrorism is extremely broad. And so basically any organisation that thinks that their strategy is best advanced by the use of armed struggle will be caught by that definition. That's a central part of the whole application. Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense to me, but what I would wonder is how you can argue that Hamas isn't a terrorist organisation if the definition is so broad.
Well, by that logic, Israel's a terrorist organisation. Do you agree?
No.
Well, think about it. Come on, man, think it through. If you agree the definition is very, very broad, then the Secretary of State could say, right, clearly it applies to Israel.
But you said it about Hamas,
they're doing a genocide.
But you're arguing the counter
to
this.
Violent. I'm going to say that the IDF is a terrorist organisation. She could do that if she wanted. She literally could. But why shouldn't she? They're doing a genocide.
Why shouldn't she? It's not a genocide. It is factually not a genocide.
Well, the South African government, the Irish government, the Spanish government, the Belgian government disagrees with you. Oh, you know better than them, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're wrong. They're wrong.
All right. Who asked you? What do you know? You obviously don't. You're out of your depth. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. I think the phenomenal submissions that we saw in the South African genocide case are far more persuasive than any of the sort of ridiculous talking points that you're propagating here. It's okay, mate. You're allowed to not know what you're talking about, but why don't you just admit it? You're yours. You don't know what you're talking about. You're out of your depth.
Frank McGuinness there, and just time to read out a statement from Garden Court Chambers, which is his chambers. Garden Court Chambers is aware of one of its members taking on a case in which they have been instructed to present an application to the Home Secretary requesting that a prescribed organisation be de-prescribed. All members of Garden Court Chambers are members of the Independent Bar of England and Wales, are self-employed and are regulated by the Bar Standards Board. Professional conduct of members is not regulated by Garden Court Chambers. The barrister concerned has chosen to undertake the case in his individual capacity, and this in no way indicates that Garden Court Chambers supports his client. We take this opportunity as a Chambers to make clear that we unequivocally condemn racism and anti-Semitism in all its forms. So Garden Court Chambers there, I think we can all